Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Can everybody hear me? Okay? Yeah. So, to begin, we're going to stand for a moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, could we have the roll call, please?
Mr. Jamie Girardi?
Here.
Derek Motlett?
Here.
Mr. Peter Hansel?
Here.
Mr. John Moody?
Here.
Mr. Christopher Poole?
Here.
Mr. Richard Janello?
Here.
Chairman Charles Green?
Here.
Thank you.
And the proof of publication, please.
The items were advertised in the Tampa Bay Times on June 7th, 2023, July 5th, 2023, August 8th, 2023, and September 6th, 2023, or by affidavit of certified mailings and site posting.
All right, thank you. So I'd like to welcome everybody here today and tell you that we're the Planning Commission. We're appointed by the Board of County Commissioners, and we meet twice monthly. We serve as a local planning agency, and we hold public hearings and transmit to the Board of County Commissioners our recommendations on comprehensive plan amendments, land development code amendments, rezonings, and conditional use requests. Planning Commission is the final decision-making body for special exceptions, certain appeals, variance requests, and alternative standard requests. However, final decisions may be appealed to the Board of County Commissioners. If anyone is in opposition to any of the items that I've mentioned, development code amendments, rezonings, or anything that we transmit to the Board of County Commissioners, it's important for you to attend the appropriate County Commission meeting. For those of you who are not familiar with the format of our meetings, we have three sections. We have continuances, consent items, and regular items. Continuances will be when the staff or the applicant has requested a continuance for any number of reasons. It's been our tradition to approve those continuance requests unless there are extenuating circumstances. We have consent items. We'll go through those one at a time. As we read them off, if anybody has any questions about any of the items on consent, please raise your hand. We'll be happy to pull them from consent for further discussion. And then we have the regular items. Those are the items that will be fully vetted and discussed by the applicant and by anybody in the audience who wishes to speak. Applicants typically will be granted 3 minutes to make their presentation at the beginning. Responders or questioners will have 3 minutes to come up and talk and ask their questions. We want to give you time to do that, but we want to also be aware of that we cover as much territory as possible. So please, when you come up, try to offer something different. So if the person before you talks about traffic, then hopefully you'll talk about something besides traffic. If there's been a request at least 24 hours prior to this meeting in writing for additional time, that it may be granted. I don't think I have any requests for extended times. I want to mention to you that it's important for you, if you have your phone with you, to put it on silent so we don't interrupt anyone that's making a presentation. And I've also been asked to please remind everybody when you are addressing the Planning Commission, please direct your comments to the commission and not to an individual person. We want to try to be as respectful to each other as we can. I know sometimes these meetings get a little bit heated, when there's disagreement, but we're here to try to benefit everybody. So let's just try to bear that in mind when you come up. Before we start the regular meeting, this is the opportunity for anybody who is here that wants to speak about something that's not on today's agenda to come up and be heard, ask your questions. Is there anybody here for that purpose? If there is, just raise your hand. I don't see anyone. Anyone on WebEx?
No one on WebEx, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Okay, so if you plan to give testimony today, I'd like you to stand, raise your right hand, and be sworn.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you are about to give is the truth so help you God?
Thank you very much. Let's begin by approving minutes. I think we have some minutes to approve.
Mr. Chair, actually on both sets of minutes, I have some potential edits for clarity.
Okay.
So on the first set of minutes for the meeting 7/6/23, page 11, it just mentions where the vote, on the motion, the vote was unanimous, with Mr. Moody voting nay in 2 different spots. I was just going to recommend rewording that for clarity, because unanimous usually means everybody voting for.
Right.
That's on the first set of minutes.
All right.
Do you want to vote on that? And then I have a couple on the second set as well.
Okay. So why don't you go ahead and make the motion then?
So I make a motion to approve the first set of minutes with those 2 edits on page 11, just for clarity, removing the word unanimous, just saying the motion carried.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And then on the second set, for the meeting 8/3/23, same thing on page 3, just saying that the vote was unanimous with Mr. Poole abstaining. So changing that for clarity. Page 14, it mentions a state shock clock, S-H-O-C-K, and I think it was supposed to be shot, S-H-O-T,
Okay.
clock. And then the last bit was actually also on page 14 and going into page 15, that it was just listed twice that Mr. Hansel moved to approve the recommendation of denial. So I just would say we would delete the second mention of him approving the, making the motion.
So you liked it so much you did it twice? Is that
Yep.
Jeez, you were against them.
Okay. All right, so you're making the motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Like sign? Okay. All right, very good. Thank you, Derek.
Sure.
Mr. Chair, if you would give us about 2 or 3 minutes, we're having some technical difficulties. Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I didn't take up enough time for you, Denise.
I was going to ask who Kaylee is. Is that the clerk here? Are you? Oh. Because actually, other than his edits, I thought these were some of the more well-written minutes that I've had come in the packet since I've been here.
Mhm.
They were an excellent summary of the discussion.
So the bar's been set high, is that what you're saying?
Sorry, you don't get credit.
You should take credit for
The
that.
bar's been set high.
You know, I read a lot of minutes, and these were good.
We usually have music to go along with these, slow periods. but
That's going on. He's got it going on in the background.
I think it's
Yeah.
too soon to take a bathroom break.
I guess.
Yeah, probably.
Never too soon.
Got the Jeopardy
But it's
song
always
stuck
the
in my
same
head.
old song.
That's right.
I had the Tournament of Champions the other night, so. So do you want to entertain a motion about the technical difficulty hold music, or?
Music on hold, yeah. You
Okay, I
ready?
think we're back on.
Okay. Very good. Cut the music. All right. Okay, Denise.
All right, good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Planning Commission members, Denise Hernandez, Planning and Development. We're going to start with item PC3, PDD 23, CU 21, for a construction demolition debris disposal facility for coastal landfill disposal of Florida. The applicant has requested a continuance to a date uncertain.
All right.
David, do I need to abstain from that, the continuance?
I think you probably should in an abundance of caution.
Okay.
Do you
So
want
we
to
have a
vote on that
request
one
for-
separately then?
Yeah, we'll do it
Okay.
separately.
All right, let's,
So, so if I could hear a motion, do we have anybody here to speak to that? No, nobody on WebEx?
for the record, no one on WebEx.
Anybody, no objections? I don't see any objections. So we have a motion to approve the continuance.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion, Chris, and second, Jamie. Any further discussion of that motion? We have one abstention. Let's have a roll call vote.
Mr. Jamie Girardi?
Aye.
Mr. Derek Schwantless?
Aye.
Mr. Peter Hansel?
Aye.
Mr. John Moody?
Present?
Mr. Christopher Poole?
Aye.
Mr. Richard Tinella?
Aye.
Chairman Charles Gray?
Aye. Okay,
Following item is PC 4, PDD 237696, zoning amendment, Greenfield Place West LLP, Greenfield Place West rezoning. It's for a change in zoning from AC Agricultural District to an I-1 Light Industrial Park District. The request is to continue the item to the October 19th, 23 Planning Commission meeting at 1:30 in Newport Richey.
all right. The applicant present? Anyone here to object? If not, I'll hear a motion.
Motion to
moved.
continue.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, like sign? Motion carries.
Mr. Chair, we're going to move on to item P8. This item was shown as a approval with conditions, but there was a modification made yesterday, which was sent to the clerk's office and to the planning commission members. It's PDD 237742 zoning amendment, Beacon Woods East MPUD, Loman Links, Inc. It's for a modification to the MPUD master plan, map H, and conditions of approval to set forth passive uses and regulations regarding the same that may occur on specific golf course areas. The request is to continue the item to the October 19th, 23 Planning Commission meeting at 1:30 in Newport Richey, and if you would please call for any comments, because it was advertised as regular.
All right, is the applicant present? Anyone here to object? I don't see any objections. So do I hear a motion for the continuance?
So moved.
Second.
And a second. Any further discussion? If not, all signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign?
The next item is not on your agenda, so this is a walk-on item. I will be giving, if you would receive and file, because I have the agenda memo for you. It is PDD 247649. It's for Seven Diamonds Commerce Park for rezoning, and it's going to be a continuance, but I'll read it into record in a second.
Motion to receive and file.
Second.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
So the item is PDD 247649. It's a zoning amendment, Seven Diamonds Commerce Park MPUD, Seven Diamonds Plan Unit Development District, to allow development of light industrial and limited heavy industrial uses on approximately 188.71 acres located on the west side of US 41, approximately 4.5 miles north of State Road 52. The request is to continue the item to the October 19th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting in Newport Richey. It was advertised for today, but there was not an agenda, for the record.
Okay.
So what date, what's that again? October?
October 19th, 2023 at 1:30 in Newport Richey.
Can I ask a quick question? Why not Dade City? with this piece of property, I mean, kind of closer to Dade City area.
It's right at the cusp, so it's
Yeah.
right on 41 on the east side. It's right there, so.
I just asked, that's all.
Thank you, sir.
I'm sorry, Denise.
I think we
we're
need a-
Trying to get organized here. What's
Nobody asked for
the,
the applicant? Or no?
yeah, is,
for comment.
where's this located?
This is located on the east side of US 41. And it is, I'm sorry, on the west side actually of 41, approximately 4.5 miles north of State Road 52.
Okay.
It's on the west side of 40.
Yeah, I actually, it's actually on the east side, so this is incorrect.
It's on the
I was
east
actually
side.
physically there, so I'm like, why is, yeah. Okay, we'll fix that. It is on the east side of 41.
And if I recall correctly, 41 kind of goes to a northwesterly, if you're moving
Yes.
north, so
So,
to me, it just makes sense to have it in Dade City, but, you know,
can I ask a question, Denise? Do you know, why was it noticed for today? I mean, is it because it was noticed at the same time as the plan amendment? 'Cause I'm only asking because normally, this one hasn't even come to the county attorney's office yet, so I'm not sure why it was already noticed.
So I
But the
think
MPD.
I think what the intent is, I think that the intent, and I do have the applicant here, and Amy, who is the project manager. I think the intent is to bring the PD and the MPUD to the board on the same date, and that was kind of like the way that sequence worked. But I will allow them to answer that question.
Amy Toll with Planning and Development. The applicant put the rezoning and the comprehensive plan amendment notice on the same applicant notice. The county did not notice for the rezoning. So just for due diligence purposes, because it was noticed on their notice, we're requesting a continuance.
Okay, so the county never recognized today's date as
Correct.
the MPD going today?
Correct. The comprehensive plan amendment was the only one that was noticed in the newspaper.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Amy.
Barbara Wilhite, 6327 Grand Boulevard for the applicant. So this has been pending since January of 2022. We were almost at the end of 2023. It's an important industrial project supported by the PEDC. When you look at which side of the county that you're going to do this on, this property's on 41, and generally we go, when it's on 41, west or east, we do either way, just to keep the project moving. It's not an inconvenience for the residents to come to either Newport Richey or Dade City. We'd ask that you approve the date. David does have the RLS, and he's reviewing the conditions next week. So we're on track for October 19th. It makes a big difference for Dr. Gill's project that we actually get this done, so we can start delivering some of this product that that the county needs to keep developing roads and houses and the like. So, thank you.
No, Barbara, are you asking for a continuance?
We are to October 19th.
Okay.
Yeah, we just didn't want, we don't want to, and the hearing schedule gets kind of really funky at the end of the year here because the board only has one meeting in November, one meeting in December. The planning commission, looks like you guys are goofing off in December too, and only have one meeting. So we're just trying to keep things going and appreciate
All right.
your support. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, is there anyone here to ask questions or object? I don't see anyone. Any other questions from up here?
Motion to continue to October 19th in Newport Richey.
Second?
Motion and second. Further discussion, all in favor of motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Okay,
Thank you. We're going to move on to item PC5. PC5 is PDD 237692. It's a zoning amendment in the name of Rogers Flooring, Inc. It's for a change in zoning from AC Agricultural District to AR1 Agricultural Residential District. Comes to you with a recommendation of approval.
okay, and the applicant present?
The applicant is virtually present.
Virtually present, okay. Is there anyone here to object?
For the record, no one on WebEx
Okay.
on the matter.
Any questions from the dais? Okay. So do I hear a motion?
Do you want to move forward with the rest of the consent, or?
I'd just like to go ahead and take care of this one. I think there's only two. Yeah, let's just do this one.
Sure, well then I'll move to approve item PC5.
Second.
And
Motion and a second, further discussion?
Thank you for staff or to the applicant for using the AR1 district rather than the AR district.
There you go. That's what you talked about last time.
Yes?
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries.
Mr. Chair, item PC6, which is PDD 237679, will be pulled from consent. So we're going to move on to item PC7, which is PDD 24CU01. You're going to start seeing 24 numbers because after October 1st, if something is heard by the board, it's got to be a 24 number. So you're going to start seeing 23 and 24 numbers. So PC7 is PDD 24CU01. It's a conditional use. The name of, it's the District School Board of Pasco County, Vertex Development, LLC, Verizon Wireless, for a 154-foot above-ground level close mount monopole wireless communication facility in an MPUD master plan unit development located on the campus of the Angeline Academy of Innovation. Comes to you with a recommendation of approval with conditions as included in your agenda packet.
All right, is the applicant present? Okay. Is there anyone here to object? I don't see anyone here to object.
And for the record, no one on WebEx.
Okay. Is there anything you'd like to say, or any questions we have from up here?
No?
I've got one question for Richard, not in opposition to the project at all, but I don't need to pull it either. This is more of a logistical question, so, do you want me to ask it now, or?
Yeah.
Okay. So this one's on Angeline campus. I'm fully in favor for it. I have a son that goes there. I know how bad the cell service is there, so I'm fully, but it's at the end of the bus loop. So, correct? Am I correct where
It's on the
location is?
northeastern side of the property.
So it's at the end of the, end of the bus loop there. So logistically, from a security perspective, all the contractors, they're Jessica Lunford?
Yeah,
Okay.
Definitely.
And is there certain times that they access that, they're limited to access that?
I'm not sure if it's in conditions of approval, but I would think normal business hours, unless there's an emergency and they gotta get out there, but normally it is. And usually they don't even have to go out, they don't really go out there much unless something's wrong with it.
Okay, yeah, normal business hours is gonna be kind of potential bus loop, that's what I'm thinking, so it's just, again, I'm fully in favor for it, I just had those quick questions.
Anything you
Yeah.
wanted to
Have
add?
answers from the applicant.
A lot of times what they do too is we know the school hours, so
Right.
they might come like an hour after school starts. They check in at the front, they get called Raptored.
Right,
They can run their driver's license through a system, and then they get a badge, and they're good to go.
okay.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, Alan Ruiz with Vertex Development. Generally speaking, we...
Alan, I'm sorry. I need your address, and I need to, you have been sworn, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
My address is 3630 West Kennedy Boulevard, Tampa, Florida, 33609.
Thank you.
And generally speaking, we will reach out prior to the start of construction and have a pre-construction meeting with the principal of the school as well as the maintenance folks, and we'll coordinate with them on a daily basis what activities are scheduled for those days, and the principal of the school generally will tell us when they would like us to not be there or how they would like our access handled during construction. Specifically with the caisson, the foundation, and with tower erection, we do that when no one's there. No students are present.
How about ongoing maintenance, kind of accessing is that off hours or?
Generally speaking, for example, once the tower is built and let's say Verizon's on there and they need to send a technician out to the site, it will be a Jessica Lunsford badged maintenance technician, but that would generally happen during regular business hours.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, there's no other questions. We have a motion?
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, like sign? Motion carries.
Okay, Planning Commission members, we're now going to move to the addendum. So it's item APC9, PDD 230450. It's for a comprehensive plan amendment. CPAS 2310, Dobies County Line Road. It's for a small-scale comprehensive plan amendment to future land use map 2-15 and sheet 4, changing from Res 1 residential 1 dwelling unit per gross acre to COM commercial on approximately 3.35 acres of property located on the south side of County Line Road and where it meets with Hernando, so it's County Line Road North at the southeast intersection of Long Lake Drive and County Line Road. On this item, you're sitting as the LPA, Local Planning Agency, so we're asking that you find it consistent with the comprehensive plan and recommend approval to the Board of County Commissioners.
Okay, any questions from the staff? From the dais, I mean. Anybody here to speak on this item? See no one?
And for the record, no one is on WebEx.
Okay. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
I'll second it.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion of the motion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Okay, motion carries.
On APC 10, are we pulling that one? Because I think there's some questions, or?
I have questions.
Okay, all right, so APC 10 is being pulled as well. So I suppose we can go back to PC, or PC 6, Schrader 52 CCMPUD.
Good afternoon, William Vermillion, Planning and Development. This is the Schrader 52 Connected City Master Plan Unit Development. This is a zoning amendment from R1 Rural Density Residential District and AR Agricultural Residential District to an MPUD to allow approximately 625 multifamily dwelling units as well as 106,686 square feet of commercial on approximately 57.5 acres. This project is located south of County Road 52 as well as east of I-75. Here's the site location. Here is the aerial location map for the property. This is a context map of the property that shows the proximity of the city limits of San Antonio as well as the city park that is right there to the east. The current zoning districts R1 and AR, as well as the future land use that's Res 6. The applicant has 3 variations with this project, the first one being from LDC 522.9.P, Neighborhood Parks. The applicant requests to waive the standard park requirements for the multifamily portion of this project. From LDC 9016011, Street Design and Dedication Requirements. The applicant does not propose an interconnect to the west or the east side of the property, as well as 522.9R on-site parking. The applicant requests to reduce the parking standards from the 2.25 spaces per unit to 1.9, as well as a waiver from the standard parking stall of 9 by 20. Here's the master plan. And now, so going back to the staff analysis of these variations, staff does support the first one to neighborhood parks. The Parks and Rec Department has determined that the addition of condition of approval 12 will suffice, which talks about specific parks review at PSP PDP stage, as well as planning and development does support the on-site parking reduction and the reduction in the overall stall area for the parking spaces. There is a Category 3 wetland in regard to 9016011 to the east that prevents a connection, as well as an existing self-storage facility. However, planning and development staff does not support the deviation to 9016011 for the connection to the east, which would be Oak Street. If you can. So the interconnect there, if I could zoom in, it's the intersection of Oak Street and Florida Avenue is where the applicant is proposing not to interconnect. Planning and development, in accordance with The LDC, as well as the Board of County Commissioners directives, does not support the deviation and proposes a full access interconnection at the intersection of Oak Street and Florida Avenue. With this, with these specific conditions of approval, this comes to you with a recommendation for approval with conditions to the Board of County Commissioners.
All right. Thank you, William. Is there any questions from up here?
William, I've got a couple questions. As far as the commercial or the non-residential, is that minimum or maximum? Because I've seen it a couple different ways. The tables in the conditions of approval represent minimum square footage. And I don't know that it's referenced that way in the text. So I don't know if the applicant, I'll just ask these questions, and maybe the applicant can address them whenever they make their presentation. The other question I had was on the neighborhood parks, and I didn't know, is there an explanation for why they're asking for a deviation, or why staff
Certainly,
supports the deviation, and then actually what is the deviation? Because
Okay.
the way I read the condition is it says that they're only required to have neighborhood parks if there's apartments 3 stories or taller.
Correct. So that specific deviation was only for the parks requirement for the multifamily portion. And the Parks and Rec Department did approve this with the addition of Condition 12, which is specifically speaking to a specific parks plan being reviewed at PSP, PDP, and that each PSP PDP submittal will be in compliance with the section of the code 522.9P, which is the parks requirement for Connected City.
Which says what?
It's essentially just the percentage of park they have to have per unit, which was their
So I guess
625.
I'm just trying to get clarity. So they build 625 apartments. Do they have to have a park or not?
Yes, they have to have a park.
Okay, because the way that's what I wanted clarity on, because the way I read the variation.
So the number of stories is
Perfect. By the way, in William's defense, he was not.
He was not the.
He's filling in for somebody.
I got you.
Brad Tippett, Planning and Development.
Hot seat, yeah.
So in Connected City, when you have an apartment complex that is 4 stories or higher, instead of doing the acreage based on the number of units, it's done based on a percentage of the developable area. So what this request was doing was saying that they wanted to apply it to a 3-story unit instead of a 4-story unit. So they want to apply that percentage based on the stories rather than the units, if that makes sense.
Okay, so if they build townhomes, single-story townhomes, they're still doing, as outlined in the requirements of the connected cities, the acreage based on the connected cities. They're not asking for, I got confused, because the first time I read this, I'm like, well, if they do townhomes and they're not 3 stories, they don't have to put any parks there. And I'm like, well, that doesn't sound right. So
If it makes you
I'm
feel
just
better,
trying
I
to-
had the same confusion.
I was just trying to clarify actually what's being said and what's getting approved.
I think it would be more helpful, Brad, if in the write-up in the agenda memo, it said what requirement, what they're not complying with by having the deviation.
Okay, we can definitely do that, and there is a statement by the parks.
So they're basically not complying with the per unit acreage requirement.
They're
Instead,
doing the percentage
they're
of the
complying
land
instead
instead.
with the percentage of land
Okay.
Right.
requirement.
Correct. I believe that's the intent of that
And does
deviation.
that work out for a park that would be smaller or larger than if they just adhered to the requirement without the alternative standard?
So, I don't know exactly, because I don't know the internal amenities and other things that are happening here, but generally, it will be less land, but likely have more programming, more things in the area related to that kind of apartment density, because apartments will tend to have their own gym and other things, pools and whatnot, so it's kind of a trade-off.
Mr. Chairman.
One more
Okay,
question, I'm
go
sorry.
ahead.
On the parking variation, the way the condition of approval is, the way I read it, is there's no limit on the amount of compact spaces they can have? They can make 100% compact?
Is that what this is? I don't remember if that was.
I think the condition says is that they're not held to the 25% maximum, and that's all it
Then
says.
yes. Yeah.
Is that the intent? It just says they should be allowed, it's condition 51 on page 12. It says they should be allowed to exceed the LDC maximum of 25% allowable compact parking stalls. So is that the intent, I guess is my question, is that there's no limit on compact spaces?
Yes, it would allow them the flexibility to have all compact spaces if that was how they designed the property.
Well, how does that work if I drive my truck there?
Yeah, typically that's a market decision. I don't know that most people would do that, but a lot of times we do have these that they want to mix that's different than the 25/75. But sometimes they have larger ones on the outside, smaller ones on the inside, different designs, but the numbers just don't work. But theoretically, based on this condition, yes, they could have all compact. I don't know if you wanted to ask the applicant, they can speak to what their intentions are.
Okay. I'll say that.
That's all I had.
And then I was curious, you're not supporting the alternative standard to not provide an interconnect.
To the east.
Does the
correct.
applicant agree with that? Because
We'll let the applicant speak to what they agree to.
I'm just curious, because it was
Yes.
listed on the consent agenda at first, and I'm like, well, if there's a dispute between the applicant and the staff, why would it be on the consent agenda?
We can work through that quirk, but yes, that's, I believe it's to the west where they actually have the wetland area. And to the east where Oak is where we want them to connect. So we agreed with one of their non-connections that they were requesting with that alternative standard, but not the other.
Okay.
Maybe staff was just hopeful that you would agree with staff.
Yeah.
Because if you approved it on consent, that you would be agreeing with staff, basically.
Talk about that later.
Okay. Thank you,
Mr.
William.
Chairman, I would just want to add, we're talking about that Parks and Rec discussion. There's 148 students that'll be there, so it's pretty important to have a park there.
Okay. All right. Okay, anything further from the applicant?
Good afternoon, Christy Barrera with Height Design, representing the applicant. My address is 5904 Hampton Oaks Parkway, Tampa, Florida. And yes, we did request to pull this from the consent agenda. When I saw the agenda on Friday afternoon, condition 2 was new to me. So quickly called the county and said we need to talk about this, that as we have in our application, we are requesting an emergency access only to the east to Oak Street, not a full access. We wanted to discuss that with you all today. So I can do that now, or I can answer any other questions that you have.
Well, is there anyone here to speak in opposition? No one on
And for the
WebEx?
record, no one on WebEx.
Okay. Since there's no one here in opposition, you're free to take your time and tell us
Okay.
what you need to tell us.
So I don't know if you can pull up the context map or Pasco mapper. I think that the aerial shows a good information about east of the property. So our project is proposing 3 access points. There will be 2 on County Road 52. One that is south of, let's see, I can't read that far away, south of, I believe, St. Angelina Road. The other one is the new construction of Teak Follow Road that will be on the eastern property boundary. And then Teak Follow is part of the Connected City Vision roadway map, and that road will be eventually constructed down to Clinton Avenue, and it's currently being constructed north through the Murata project. So Teak Follow will go from County Road 52 to Clinton, and then farther south through Murata. So that will be an important project, or important road. So we feel that because we have those 3 access points, one to the east isn't necessary for development. Also, if you can see from this map, east of us is the city of San Antonio, Oak Street, which is the north-south street, and Florida Avenue, which is the east-west street, are both maintained by the city. There are 8 single-family homes on Oak Street, and there are 8 additional parcels, not all of them have homes on them, on the north side of Florida Avenue. The south side of Florida Avenue has 2 property owners, multiple parcels, but only 2 property owners. So we feel that having a full access to Oak Street would be something that those residents of San Antonio would not like, the extra traffic on their roads that currently are not county standard roads. By having a full access, those roads or one of those roads would need to be brought up to county standards. We feel that that is an undue burden for this project because constructing a quarter mile of either one of those roads up to county standards is a pretty significant cost and would only get 16 or less residents or homes to be able to use our road through our project. It could be a cut-through for other people to go through our project and go onto Florida or to go onto Oak Street, rather than having those few people use our road to go west to Teak Follow and then be able to go to County Road 52 or Clinton Avenue. So we think it's not a good idea for the existing residents that are in the city, and it really doesn't make sense for our project. We think an emergency access is appropriate, and if the county feels that a full access is something that makes sense, then we would suggest that we have an emergency access for the time being, and then when the county or the city feels it appropriate to bring one of those roads up to county standards, then we could open it up as a full access. The last thing that I wanted to bring up is the location of the access that we were proposing. It's very close to our southern boundary, and it would create a very odd jog in the roadway network because Florida Avenue kind of would only, the 25 feet on the north side of Florida Avenue is the same as our southern property line, and so there would be this jog in the road that wouldn't make sense from a traffic standpoint. I do have Ali Atefi here with me today that he can talk more of the traffic logistics, but if it was a full access, we would potentially have to work with another property owner to the south to make that intersection work properly. But at the end of the day, you know, those 16 residents in San Antonio, I think, would have less of a benefit and more of a detriment to their homes and the traffic on that road if it was a full access. So we're recommending it stay emergency.
So Christy, can I ask you a question and staff? Why is the property to the northeast of your project in VOPH?
So this is Connected City.
I'm sorry, Connected City.
In northeast, yes. Well, so everything in blue is not in Connected City because it's in incorporated San Antonio.
My question for you and staff is, why not connect to the property to the northeast as opposed, which it is in Connected City, which isn't part of the existing city of San Antonio, as opposed to trying to connect to the east to Oak Street? Because their code requires a connection, in theory, to the east. It didn't necessarily require it to be at Oak Street, so why not interconnect to your northeast instead?
He's talking about here.
Okay. We could. We are proposing an apartment complex that typically we like to have those gated, so the thought was less access points so we could also gate this project. But that's something that I could talk to the applicant about between now and the board hearing, if that is a better location.
I mean, Brad, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if they had shown a connection to the east, to the vacant land, that would not have been an LDC variation, right? That still would have met our code.
Correct, technically it would have. What we were trying to consider, you know, that grid and the ability to get to Curley Street and the ability to get north to 52 through another route by making that connection. So, but yes, technically the other one would also meet the code. It would technically be to the east.
Well, it seems to me, I mean, I'm not the planner, you guys are, but it seems to me that it would be more important to connect to property that's in connected city, we're using the name connected now, that would be more important to connect a property in connected city as opposed to property that's not in connected city.
Pardon the pun?
Well, connected city was given that name for multiple reasons, but
Yes, that's
part of
why-
it was interconnectivity.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure why we're not interconnecting to other property in connected city.
So we are connecting to other property via Teak Follow. And our east-west road that will be east of Teak Follow is going to be on the property boundary. So we will have connection to the south as well. David, I think the area that you were pointing out, there, I believe, is a large wetland. I don't know if it's a Category 1 wetland or not. So there would be limited connection to the east in that location because of this wetland chain that starts in our property and kind of goes northeast from there.
I mean, are you saying that those two parcels to the northeast are basically undevelopable? I can't tell from the aerial.
No, I don't think they're undevelopable, but I do think that there is it appears
looks to
there's
be a wetland
big
there.
area of trees. I think it's a wetland because there's one on our site that I think continues off-site. So I had the concept plan that I was going to see if we could pull up and share with you all.
Yeah, it's kind of,
And here.
right,
And then this should be too. This looks like a creek.
that is, yeah, that's a creek.
So I'm sure somebody will develop it, but I don't know about the connectivity and a road going through the wetland. There might be some connectivity, but I don't know how far it could get.
I mean, the reason I'm asking the question is, if Oak Street is as bad as you say it is, if those two parcels came in for development, I'm not sure we would want them using, it seems like we'd rather have them orient their development towards 52 and Teak as opposed to having their development go out to Oak Street. Because they're gonna have the same issue that you're describing, which is they're gonna be potentially loading their traffic on that road.
Right, or County Road 52.
And they would likely need multiple access points
Right.
as well, so.
I know, but the way this is being developed, they'd have, that northeastern parcel, doesn't appear they'd have any ability to get to Teak
There may be an
Road other than
opportunity-
going to 52.
There may be an opportunity, and I think Chrissy may talk with her client about the southeast portion with a northward access point into those properties as opposed to directly out onto Oak. We would be willing to talk about that as well, as an option, I think.
I mean,
That
I'm only pointing
bypasses
out that,
the wetland area,
again,
so-
you guys are the planners, I'm just saying that, to me, the bigger harm would be not the people that live off of Oak Street not being able to get to this new development, it's more the yet to be entitled development. That, if it's in connected city, it could be intense levels of development. And it seems to me that we'd want it to be able to connect to Teak, what's the name of that road? Teak Follow Road, without having to go out into 52.
I think that makes sense. Where we're showing the bright green park, there might be a potential that we can have access to the north there. So we can, obviously, this is the concept plan, this isn't part of the zoning approval, but we can look at adding a northern access to those parcels that are in connected city and continue potentially to have the emergency access on Oak or just have this access to the north.
Does that work?
Okay.
I think that probably would meet the code, because now they do have a connection to the property to the east. And they wouldn't even need an LDC variation.
Correct. Well, they still need one for the west, but we agree with the one in the west.
Right.
And what's the reason for the one to the west not to have one to
there's
the
a-
west?
Does that need to be read into the approval?
Well, I haven't heard Christie definitively say that they're going to add a connection at that point yet, but if
I
they,
thought I just heard her say that.
So I would like to talk to the client between now and the board, but I believe that sounds reasonable.
okay.
Do you have any more information on the parking the parking spots?
So yes, the condition does read that we could have 100% compact spaces. In all likelihood, that's not going to happen. At this time, the applicant is not the developer of the site, and so they just want to keep it flexible for whoever the end user is. They're thinking it might be more than 25%. It's highly unlikely it will be 100% because we know people drive larger vehicles these days, and they're in the business of, renting out their apartments, so they're going to want to accommodate all of their residents with adequate parking.
Okay. And then this might be a question for staff potentially. How does I see it's Pasco County Utilities, but how does the utility situation work out with neighboring San Antonio? I'm not familiar enough with the city.
So there are a ton of utilities that are going in Clinton currently.
Okay.
The thought for this project is that those utilities will continue up Teak Follow to this project.
Okay, so from the south as opposed to,
I believe there may be water in County Road 52, but most of the utilities will be coming from the south.
okay, that makes more sense because it looked like everything in the north was San Antonio, so.
Christy, where is Teak Fallow? Is that the Vision Road that you're showing on the?
Yes.
Okay.
So it has about 3 or 4 names right now, but it is that large Vision Road on the east side of the property.
On the west side of the property.
Yes, I'm sorry, west side of the
We're having
property.
trouble with that today.
East, west.
Okay.
Got to get my lefts and rights, right?
It's been a long week.
On the non-residential entitlements, what is the clarification there? Is that a maximum, a minimum?
So in the transportation analysis, we studied 106,000 and change square feet of non-residential. That is the minimum that is required in Connected City for each MPUD. They're called service-ready site areas. So it's this red square at the intersection of Teak Follow and County Road 52. So the plan is to have about 106, but we can have more if there's a user that comes in that wants that. What we would need to do if we wanted more than the 106 is to use the land use equivalency matrix and convert residential to non-residential, or come back to you and ask for additional square footage.
But the land use equivalency matrix that's attached with the conditions of approval doesn't have any conversion.
Well, we might have to update that too. So this is just showing correct apartments to townhomes, so we'll update that.
I was just curious, I just don't know how it works. I mean, if they have to provide at least 106, but, I mean, normally when we say you get 100,000 square feet of non-residential and so many units of residential, and that's your cap. I mean, I understand if the Connected City has, you gotta have that as a minimum, but it's just not clear to me.
Yeah, we're very flexible with the service-ready site acreage in Connected City in terms of the square footage. The intent is to bring business there, and there's actually restrictions on the uses that can go there that can't be a lot of your typical stuff. This is more closer to target industry type things, job production, different things like that. So, we tend to be very flexible if they have a user that comes in and wants 110,000 or something like that, and we'll work with them at that point if that happens. But the 106,000 is the minimum requirement required by the code for a property of this size. So that's what they've come in with.
But that's only a minimum per Connected City, right? I mean, this is 106,000. If they want more than 106, they're converting to multifamily. So that's where I'm confused, is where the 106,000 minimum is part of this approval. Because if they want more than that, they're gonna use the land use equivalency matrix to convert it.
Right.
Because that
We'll fix
cap
that.
was set at the transportation, at the
Well,
traffic
they
study.
may not, because those entitlements are basically considered exempt uses for timing and phasing analysis, so they may be able to just add additional square footage through a non-substantial amendment to the MPUD. It may not require them to add it to the loom, but I defer to Brad on that.
Yeah, that's historically what's happened, is they've been a type of use that's exempt, and we haven't had to do anything substantial to get it there.
Usually our problem is them not wanting to build those
Sure.
entitlements.
Right.
That's a good problem to have if they want to build more than
Mhm.
the minimum. So I suspect Brad would find a way to make sure they can build more than the minimum. Probably as a non-substantial amendment if they needed to. But I don't have a problem if they want to modify the loom to allow for that, because that would be,
Yeah, usually everybody's coming in here wanting to take that away and add more
Right, so-
residential, and I understand.
Yes, we know we can't do that.
Okay.
I still have one concern, and that's the parking. If we greenlight this and we have, let's say, 0 in effect on compact parking, as Mr. Mooney stated, if a person comes in with a very large vehicle, like a pickup truck or something along that line, it's difficult for cars, let me rephrase this. If that car is parked in a compact parking place, then the vehicles that are next to it, both the left and right side, they're gonna have difficulty in opening doors and that type of thing. That's my concern, is that fact that they could go to 100% compact parking. And that's my issue.
Would there be any objection to putting bracket?
Some type of cap in there that needs to be, something needs to, because if,
So it's 25 to 75% or something like that, putting a cap?
Yeah, I think that that would be fine if we cap it, just do the inverse, that we say at least 25% must be standard parking spaces or size spaces.
you
Is that-
said
is that a good number for you?
25%,
I
you want
just-
it the other way around, I think.
So 25% would be standard, we could have up to 75% compact.
I just
that-
threw a number out there. I don't know if that's a number you had in mind.
Well, I think that's probably what they did when they said no more than 25% compact anyway, so yeah, that's like where'd that
Yeah.
number come from?
Yeah, that's where I'm going from.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, we would be agreeable to that.
It just makes common sense, because, as you said, you're gonna have a number of people living in this area, and we have seen issues with people hitting other cars when they open doors and that type of thing.
Yes.
So, yes.
Yeah, I think it would be a self-fulfilling prophecy to put all compact there and not be able to rent the unit, so I think, that's.
I think you do that once and you learn from
yeah,
your
that's just-
mistake, right?
It's like putting a survival clause in your agreement, just, you're not gonna do something that's foolish. You want to do something that fits the market, so.
Yep. So that'd
That's
be an
why-
amendment to condition 51, then.
To say that there would be a minimum of 25% of the spaces not compact. Is that what you want to say, Peter? Is that what you're saying?
Standard.
Standard spaces.
If they can live with it, I can live with it, as long as there's something there,
In the proposed parking ordinance that's soon to come before us, does the standard parking space dimension change? To what?
I don't have it in front of me, I would have to look at it, but yes, I believe
Careful on the
we're,
language.
yeah.
And standard means the current 9 by 20. I'm guessing that in the proposed ordinance, the standard space is getting smaller.
Yeah, we can change that to say 9 by 20 spaces in the condition, just to be clear. That's fine, I don't think.
Yeah.
we're-
Good point.
Staff's willing, if they're gonna change the whole ordinance, why would this project have a different size?
You can certainly.
We're treading on dangerous territory. The most
think for the
popular
very
selling
reason
truck
that-
in this country is the Ford F-150, and most people drive SUVs. So,
Well, she did make a good point, though, that the end user is going to want to sell rental units, and they're going to have to cater to their clientele, so in theory, they should.
I'm gonna tell you something. I've been doing engineering for 30 years, and what my clients want to do is maximize the size of the gross leasable area, and they want to minimize the cost of the infrastructure on the outside of the building. And that means if they can make a parking space that's 3 feet wide by 10 feet long, that's what they will do. And I will caution everybody, when this parking ordinance comes, because the proposal is to want to change the word minimum to minimum to maximum. I literally have clients who will build developments with 0 parking. And I think that's going to backfire in your face. That's going to be something that you're going to wish you didn't propose. They will do this. And there's nothing you're going to be able to do to stop them when you do that. We've got MPUDs that have come through here in the last couple of months where the proposal is literally for 100% lot coverage. We'd be real careful.
Okay, we probably should focus on this particular condition, though.
Well, I'm just saying, we're,
Much longer discussion.
So, it sounds like the planning commission,
I did originally say she could have a lot of time, but, you know.
did you already have a public comment?
But, yes,
Yeah,
I
for
did.
general
Yeah.
public.
I was gonna, Christie, would you talk a little bit about the Parks and Recreation and what the idea behind that is?
Just to bring that to a close, the actual standard space dimension is not changing in the new modification.
okay.
Places we're proposing.
So, before we move on, while we're on the topic of parking, can we just get a motion to change condition 51, however you all want it to read, so then we can move on to whatever the next issue is?
Do you want to make that motion, Peter, or?
I'll make that motion.
So it's,
So you want to cap,
Can you restate it for me?
you want a cap of compact spaces, not more than 75%?
A minimum of 25% standard spaces,
And that's 75% compact.
up to 75% compact.
Well, if you have 25 here and you got 75 there,
But that line isn't always right there. It's gonna be 36 or 42 or something is what it's ultimately gonna end up being. But
But I
minimum
mean,
of 25.
okay,
you
but the
could- you
goal
could-
will be
you could
25,
add-
75.
At least a minimum.
But you could add at the end of the first clause, but not to exceed 75% of the parking
Sure,
spaces.
yeah, do the same thing, yep.
That's a simple way to do it.
Right.
We like David.
So that's what Peter just said, right, Peter?
Yes, sir,
I'll second just what Peter said.
as long as it comes out correctly in the minutes.
Okay.
We'll make sure we get it right.
Okay, we have a motion, I think. Do we have a second?
I think Jamie seconded it.
I'll second, yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
you
sorry.
did.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, like sign.
Okay, so we're
Okay.
done with parking. Now, what's the next issue?
Well, I think the other items that are gonna be addressed, and I don't know how, if that needs to be as part of our approval, but the loom needs to be updated to include a conversion for non-residential, right? I still think there needs to be some kind of revision to the park language.
Well, yeah, I think your motion needs to state that staff needs to revise the neighborhood parks variation to better describe what the deviation is. In other words, what the code requires and what they're not doing
Okay.
as a result of the deviation. Because
We
the
still
current,
haven't exactly heard what that is.
my understanding, and again, not very well described in the memo, is that if it was, normally if a three-story building would have to comply with the per unit requirements of the neighborhood park ordinance. In other words, they'd have to provide one unit per every,
100.
one acre for every 100 units. There's an exception in Connected City for, if you're 4 stories or higher, that you provide a percentage of the land area as opposed to a per unit requirement. They're trying to say that they want to take advantage of the 4-story and higher benefit, even if they're only 3 stories. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's correct. So it's 10% of the buildable land area that the apartment site takes up. This has been approved in other MPD zonings in Connected City and also outside of Connected City. I think at one point, the Parks Department was working on a new ordinance because they felt, and so did we, that the Parks ordinance is more geared toward single-family detached and townhome units. When you have to have 1 acre per 100 units, that takes up a lot of space for apartment complexes. So in this instance, if we had 625 apartment units, that'd be 6¼ acres of park space. What the Parks Department typically doesn't count in their acreage calculation is the amenities that are inside the building, that are inside, a lot of them have gyms or, other recreation spaces under the roof, that they are now saying, okay, that can count towards some of your park space as well. So it's more of a percentage of that overall apartment site rather than an acreage-specific number.
So you said it's 10% of buildable area that the building covers, so what would that work out to be in this concept?
I don't have that number, and I don't believe it's just what the building covers. It would include the drive aisles, the parking spaces, all of that
Okay.
as well.
Buildable upland.
Right,
Buildable upland.
yeah, the stormwater ponds that are needed to support the buildings. So it's a larger area.
Okay.
So in most cases, it's slightly less than the 1 acre per 100 units, to give a little bit of relief to this type of product.
I think that's covered with condition of approval 12. And maybe it's just that I wasn't clear on the memo, or the memo to me needed to be clarified,
Yeah, I
which-
don't
in which
think it-
case.
I think the condition, I agree with you. The
Right.
condition works as written, but the description in the memo is not complete.
Okay.
It should say something similar to what I just said verbally,
Right.
and it doesn't.
So nothing needs to be revised as far as that goes.
Well, I think you can make a motion, if you, your motion for approval could ask that it, the agenda memo be revised to better describe the neighborhood parks deviation.
Okay. And does anything need to be revised in the conditions of approval for the,
Well,
Connection.
I was looking at condition 2. All it says is revised master plan to show full access to the east side of the MPD. So if they are willing to provide a connection to the northeast property, I would argue that's still the east side of the MPD, and that they could comply with that.
I agree.
So I don't think you need to change condition 2. Unless you don't want them to interconnect at all.
Does that get rid of the emergency access to Oak, or does that stay?
No, I don't think, condition 2 doesn't prohibit them from having an additional emergency access.
Okay.
This is just saying that staff wants to see a full access on the east side of the property, but if they can provide it to the northeast piece, I think that would comply with condition 2.
Okay.
I actually support the applicant in not providing the interconnect to the east. And I understand the general requirement, the general need for interconnects. And I know we have a commissioner or more that's one of their hot buttons. But I'll point a couple of examples where an interconnect has destroyed a neighborhood. Fox Hollow Drive between US 19 and Little Road. You took a wonderful, quiet street and have turned it into a cut-through. It's a de facto highway. I would never walk on one of the sidewalks along Fox Hollow Drive. That would be taking your life into your hands. And if I had children, I could never live along Fox Hollow Drive. Jasmine, same thing. We took a street, we cut it from US 19 to Little Road, yet we got interconnection. And now we've made it miserable for the residents who front along that road. So interconnections can be good, but we can't do them at the expense of a neighborhood. So I appreciate that the applicant was willing to respect and I'm sorry, my screen went dark. It's Florida Ave, the residents on Florida Ave. I'd be mad if that became a cut-through street because somebody wanted to build an apartment complex over here. So I support you in your alternative standard request there. I think sometimes we have to apply some common sense to some of this, and sometimes there's exceptions to
Yeah,
these requirements.
Commissioner Moody, I don't disagree with you. I was just asking why staff, to your point, there is no neighborhood in the northeast, though. There's no neighborhood you'd be destroying if you have an interconnect to the vacant land. So I was asking, why didn't staff require an interconnect there instead?
Well, I think they can show an interconnect up at the northeast corner, and I think they're gonna find it's a wetland. And then
Well,
it's
but I
gonna be
think-
a useless interconnect.
But
So
if you
what's the
do it,
point?
if you do it in the eastern part of the MPUD, there is some developable land where I think Christie's talking about putting it is that eastern part of the L.
But aren't we affecting that landowner's rights to develop his property? We don't know what his or her development plans are for that property, and we don't know if that's compatible with this multifamily development and
Well, if they're in
we want the
connected,
multifamily development being a cut-through for somebody. We don't know what they're gonna develop, and then all of a sudden, they may be cutting through a multifamily development.
well, the difference is they are in connected city. So they have the right to do fairly intense development, and there was at least a concept in connected city that even if you didn't have vehicular connections, that you'd have golf cart connections, that all these roads in connected city are supposed to have the ability to have golf cart. So Teak Road, if you look at the cross-section of Teak Road, it's gonna have a separate ability for you to drive golf carts on it. So it's all supposed to be one giant golf cart-friendly community. So even if you're not gonna have a car interconnect, it seems like you would want at a minimum to have the ability for golf carts to get to that golf cart
Okay.
path. I mean, I'm not saying it's up to the planning commission, I'm just saying that Connected City was approved assuming there would be at a minimum strong golf cart interconnectivity between uses. That was part of the premise of Connected City being approved the way that it was. And there's been other projects that have come to the planning commission that have required, even if there wasn't a vehicular interconnection, that there at least be a golf cart interconnection.
So can we limit that to the golf cart?
That's up to planning commission and the applicant and staff. You know, I don't have an opinion one way or the other, but I think if you didn't at least require the golf cart interconnectivity, it's probably not really consistent with the intent of Connected City.
So we as staff agree basically with what David just said, and also with you, John, as far as using common sense. However, we've been given a very clear directive from the Board of County
I
Commissioners,
understand
so
that,
that's what
and
we're
I'll just
bringing
say
to
then
you.
that my comments directed to the commissioners, that all interconnects are not the same. They're not one size fits all, and we can't destroy a neighborhood for the sake of providing an interconnection. We need to look and make sure that it's a responsible interconnection. So, and I'm not saying I understand, I watch the commission meetings, I hear the discussions and the debate, but I think we need to think about them. Hey, it's one thing when we're out in the middle of the county and we're planning one giant MPUD next to the next giant MPUD next to the next one, and we've got a blank canvas to work with. But when we've got some existing conditions to work with, it's not fair to destroy somebody's neighborhood for the sake of a new development. That's all I'm saying.
Understood, and we can't consider that. We have the other thing, even if this was not connected city, this was a standard Euclidean zone, we do have the requirement for the continuation of the existing street pattern. That's also in the code, so that's another one of those. So we're weighing a bunch of different things here. We were in slight disagreement because of that, because of the board direction. But if the planning commission believes otherwise, we will amend our recommendation to include whatever the planning commission decides on this.
And I personally don't think the compromise position that apparently the applicant seems to be in agreement with does what you're talking about, because it's not connecting to the existing neighborhood.
It's emergency access.
Yeah,
These are brand-new neighborhoods we're talking about.
I would wholly in support. If you want to do a golf cart connection, that's great.
You want to make a motion, Jamie, since you brought it up?
Poor Jamie.
Well, I don't really know that we're amending any of the conditions of approval. These are all things that are for discussion that.
Well, I mean, condition 2 says full access. Typically, when staff says full access, that means full vehicular access. If you don't want full vehicular access, you'd probably need to change that to say full golf cart access.
Well, wouldn't the connection to the northeast still meet that condition? Therefore, there wouldn't be need to be a change?
It would, but what I'm hearing Mr. Moody say is even the connection to the northeast, he wants to be golf cart, not cars. That's a policy decision for you and the board. I'm just saying that the way the condition's worded, when staff says full access, that typically means full vehicular access. But yes, to the northeast would fulfill that requirement. But if you want it limited to golf cart access, it wouldn't say full access, it would say golf cart access.
Yeah, and to David's point earlier, that, Connected City does have an intensity and density level that's higher than most, so all of those trips then without a vehicular connection in this area would be going up onto that 52.
I'm going to make it clear, I'm not opposed to whether it's a golf cart access or a full vehicular access. What I'm more concerned with is that
The effect on the
There,
existing road.
we're going to burden someone else's property who's not even here to participate in this discussion.
I'm not sure I would view that as a burden. I mean, to Mr. Tippin's point, I think if they had a connection to get over to Teak Follow Road, that doesn't require them to go on
That
52.
depends on what they want to build. I mean, unfortunately, we don't get to pick and choose what's going to be
I don't disagree
built
with you,
there.
but when, the second they got put into Connected City, there was a presumption that they're entitled to fairly intense levels of development. I'm not saying they have to develop that, but there's a big difference between that vacant land and the folks that are on Oak Street.
I don't think it's not an issue of intensity, it's an issue of flexibility. If they come first and decide, well, I'm putting a stub out right here, then the next guy's forced to design his project around where they put a stub out.
If he develops it in an intense manner. If he just puts one house there, staff would never make him use that interconnect. The reason for these interconnects is they're trying to assume that somebody does want to come in and develop their property with intense levels of development.
And this is gonna likely not be low density. There's no single-family entitlements left, really. So this is going to be a higher intensity when they come in.
Right, and what I'm saying is you're forcing them into designing their site at whatever intensity it is around wherever that interconnect may be that they never had a choice in.
And we do that with every project in the county.
Yeah,
That's
it's
that's
just the way it
common
works.
practice. First one in sets alignments.
Well,
Yeah,
then that's not planning, is it? That's reacting.
wow.
Well, I guess that neighboring property owner, vacant land was probably noticed with this MPUD. I mean,
I-
is that accurate?
I understand.
So they had every opportunity to come in and weigh in on this project.
And there's always a difference between planning and predicting the future too, so we can plan, but
Well,
the future
I
can go a
won't,
different
I'm not
direction
gonna
from
get
what we
into
can
it,
plan.
because I can give you a litany, and I can show you, for instance, there's a section in our land development code that requires interconnection of commercial parcels. And how many developments do we have up and down where the interconnection on the site was built over here, and the other guy built the interconnection over there, so nobody actually got interconnected? So we defeated the whole purpose. And why? Because there was no pre-planning in advance. Yes, you can make a grandiose statement like that in the land development code, but that doesn't assure that that's the way it gets built in the field. And it's not one example of that. I can show you where that happens all over the county.
Well, to speak to your discussion about, traffic issues with neighborhoods that never had those intended consequences is, and this may be better suited for the board to discuss, but you can discuss traffic calming as well. That could be a good compromise to those interconnections to do things to calm the traffic. And, so your example with Jasmine, for example, if there were more stop signs, if there was other traffic calming things in there, it might not create such an issue with those residents, and that might be something the board can discuss. You can get your interconnections, but also not really burden those neighbors.
I hear you. I'll put
Well,
the speed tables on your street.
The code
and then
really
see
only
how I like
requires
it.
one interconnecting road, right?
I'm sorry, say that again?
The board really only requires one interconnect.
No, typically it's an interconnection to the north, to the south, to the east, and to the west.
Okay,
One in each direction, and
Well, that's what I
the
meant,
code,
one.
the code requires continuation of
One in
existing
that
street
direction,
pattern on
yeah.
top of that, so if there are
If they-
other
If they
streets.
connected to the northeast, it would meet our code.
Yeah.
That's your
so
question.
why don't we just say a minimum of one connection?
It already says,
says that.
it says that. The only issue is, if you leave the wording as currently worded, staff would interpret that as a full vehicular interconnect, not just golf carts.
Okay, so the question is, do we want to change it to a minimum you want to change it to, leave it a full connect, or change it to a golf
Personally,
cart?
I think we leave it as a full connect, because looking at the property owners, the existing property owners, it's all the same person that owns all the rest of the property over to Oak Street.
Fair enough.
And in
And
that
they
case,
did not want to sell.
in that case, you're actually helping by providing that connection to them to keep traffic off of Oak Street. So I think we leave the condition as is. I'd like to make a motion to that effect.
I'll second
Do you
that.
want to just make a motion for the balance of the agenda item?
Yep.
You want to
That
be
and
done?
then the correction to the agenda memo for the neighborhood parks?
And the addition of the non-residential stuff to the loom.
So just to clarify for us, we're talking about not making the connection at Florida and Oak, but making the connection to the vacant land and make that a full connection? Is that the?
Well, I think, I didn't hear anybody object to the emergency connection.
Right, we
to
can have an
Oak. That was my
emergency or
question.
a golf cart only or something like that to that intersection at Florida and Oak. But
I mean, I
the
guess
full
question-
connection you're
the
talking
question-
about
could be
is
full.
to the
Let me ask a
vacant
question
land.
to the applicant. Does the applicant want the emergency interconnect to Oak? Or were you doing that to meet some code requirement?
We were doing it to meet a code requirement. There may be more than 100 units on that east side, so we would have needed it for that. I will also mention that even though everyone has the same last name to the north, families don't always get along, and my folks that were trying to get this approved tried to also purchase that property, and they did not want to sell at the time that they sold this property.
So now you're trying to complicate it again.
Never mind, Jamie.
I'm just saying,
They had it all figured out.
families, cousins, sisters, whatever.
I would strongly recommend you not make planning decisions based on family
Right.
dynamics.
I like most of my family.
That's right. Are you amending your motion?
I'm not amending my motion.
Okay, so what is your motion? Could you restate it, please?
You want me to help
Motion
you?
to approve
Go
the
ahead, Al.
conditions of approval the way they are, with amendments to the memo and amendments to the loom. To
And
add
that
the
includes the
non-residential.
prior change to condition
And
51, which we
includes-
already did.
Yeah,
Right.
that's correct.
Okay, I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second. Further discussion of the motion?
And the applicant, so you're not opposed to the emergency access, no, okay, can we?
So if we're gonna potentially have to have an access to the north, I would like to talk to the applicant before the board hearing, just to make sure that if we're adding a full, then maybe they would want to get rid of the emergency. I'm not sure, though, so I would like that to be at least an option still.
Okay, but that's something you'll discuss before.
Yes.
Okay, well, we have, all right, so
Well,
we got a
right, so
motion on the
recommendation.
floor. We got a second?
Yep.
Anything else?
Nope.
If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign? Thank you.
Thank you for all your time.
Thank you.
Okay, what else?
APC 10?
APC 10.
All right, I think we're ready, right?
I'm just waiting for the
Oh,
presentation to load.
they can't keep up with you.
We need that music, I'm telling you.
I know it. I agree.
Good afternoon, Ebro Stevens, Planning and Development. Before you is PDD 230445, a small-scale comprehensive plan amendment in the name of CPAS 2309 Carly Greenfield Road Industrial. The proposal is to amend the future land use map, map 2-15 and sheet 5, to change from ROR, retail, office, residential, and AGR, agricultural, rural, to IL, industrial light. This is to allow for light industrial uses on approximately 7.04 acres. The location is on the north side of Greenfield Road, northwest intersection of US 41 and Greenfield Road. There is a accompanying rezoning from AC, Agricultural District, C1, Neighborhood Commercial District, and I1, Light Industrial Park District to I1. The site is located in the central market area. This is the aerial. Concept map, as you can see. There is a railroad on the western boundary of the property. Access currently is one on Greenfield Road as well as 2 access points on US 41. Just to note, the subject site is near the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council area of interest, approximately 7,800 feet to the north and 2,000 feet to the south. The existing future land use, as I mentioned before, AGR as well as ROR. Surrounding future land use, to the west and south, we have AGR, and to the north and east, we have ROR. The proposed future land use of IL. And zoning. AC Agricultural District, C1 Neighborhood Commercial District, and I1 Industrial Park District, as I mentioned before. The proposed amendment is consistent with the following comprehensive plan policies: Policy Flu 187, Economic Development; Policy Flu 1810, Preservation of Capacity for Employment Generating Uses; and Policy Flu 1101, Compatibility Review. And with that, staff recommend that the local planning agency find the proposed amendment consistent with the comprehensive plan and to recommend approval to the Board of County Commissioners. I will take any questions that you may have.
Okay, do we have any questions?
I have a quick question, because I know Mr. Moody has a longer question. So, how close is this to the Seven Diamonds Commerce Park that the Planning Commission just recently approved? Does maybe the applicant knows? Okay.
I was going to ask a question too before Mr. Moody. Quick question.
Everybody wants to jump ahead of Mr.
Yeah.
Moody.
The TBRPC area of interest, what is that?
The Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council area of interest.
Yeah.
That's referring to the industrial study that the Regional Planning Council did.
Okay.
It's identified sites of interest for industrial development.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
But they didn't identify this I-1 property as part of that. That's interesting.
They missed it.
Yeah.
I have a question regarding the utility needs assessment.
I do believe we have utilities staff available for those questions. We had asked them to be.
Thank you.
And can I answer the question as far as the distance is concerned?
Yes.
So the Seven Diamonds Mine is approximately 3.2 miles north of this location.
Okay, and related to Mr. Moody's point, we were told that Seven Diamonds Mine would likely be on well and septic, is my recollection.
I haven't asked a question yet.
Well, we all know what your question's going to be. Go ahead.
You do, because I tipped you off. By the sunshine law, I can't tip these guys off.
Yes. Go ahead and ask your
You
question now.
So, the utilities analysis shows that there's 0 MGD uncommitted capacity at the Shady Hills wastewater treatment plant. It says that the existing flow is 9.68 MGD, and the current total outstanding commitments are 12.26 MGD, which far exceed the total of capacity of 14 MGD. Those add up to 22. And then there's an explanation from utilities that says, well, today the flow is 9.68 MGD, and that we only commit the capacity when we actually apply to build a development, not when they come in for rezoning, not when they ask for a comprehensive plan amendment, it's actually when they come in. So that infers that they already have 12.26 MGD of actual committed capacity they've committed to for actual applied for developments. But then this kind of infers there's no need to worry because over the last couple of years, they've only seen a 0.07 MGD per year increase in the flow. Well, if you take 12.26 MGD and you divide it by 0.07 MGD per year, you're saying there's no need to worry because it's going to take 175 years before all these developments that have applied for permits actually exceed the flow. Well, I don't think they're going to take 175 years to build their projects. And they're saying they're only seeing a 0.07 MGD per year increase at the plant. So using the numbers straight out of the utilities manual at 75 gallons a day of wastewater per person and 2.67 persons per ERU, that's only 0.07 MGD is 350 dwelling units. We've approved way more than 350 in the year that I've been here. And we know they're going up, they're popping up like mushrooms everywhere. So I'm hoping somebody can, maybe I'm misunderstanding something, or maybe 0.07 is a miswritten number, or
I'm sure you can answer that for us.
So I think utilities should answer that question, but I do have a related question, which is, are we confident that this site is going to be using county water and sewer, or is it going to be like Seven Diamonds where the staff report says one thing and then the applicant gets up and says, we're going to be on well and septic? I don't know why the staff report says that. So,
That's what I was gonna ask too, is what the
so,
intended
I
use
mean,
is.
I have the same complaint. If that's the case, I have the same complaint I had about Seven Diamonds is, don't put all this information in there if it's going to be on well and septic. Tell us you'll be on well and septic.
Well, the memo actually states that for sewer capacity, it says sufficient capacity will be available for adequate wastewater treatment services through implementation of planned improvements.
so then the question becomes when. I mean, I'm not opposed to this project. I want to make sure that if they need utilities, that the planned improvements are in the pipeline. We all know that it takes a while to design an expansion to a treatment facility, figure out what you're going to do with the effluent, acquire all of the state and federal permits that are necessary to do that, and then find a contractor to construct it and, you know, train staff to operate it.
Are there planned improvements to well and septic tank?
Well, utilities department wouldn't put any of that analysis if they're on well and septic.
Wait a minute. Barbara Will Heights, 6327 Grand Boulevard. We were just at a Euclidean rezoning. Unlike an MPUD where we know what we're doing and we come here and say this is what we're doing, we're at a Euclidean zoning. There's a range of uses. We have not met with the utilities department to discuss any particular site plan. So I can't answer you, but your questions should be answered by the utilities department. I just can't tell you what our use is going to be, and we'll meet with the utilities department and we'll decide if it's septic or sewer or what it would be.
So you have no idea of the intended use just
No,
yet?
I do not.
Well, Barbara, but your other client had at least had some preliminary conversation. That was at the plan amendment stage.
It's because it was a planned development MPUD, specific uses, yeah.
But he at least knew where the closest point of connection was and knew that it wasn't going to be feasible to bring water and sewer that distance, and so he was upfront with us and said, I'll be on well and septic. So,
Right.
Has anybody, I'm not saying you, but has our staff had any conversations with utilities about the closest point of connection to county water and sewer? I mean, my annoyance is not necessarily with the applicant. My annoyance is, why do we talk about utility capacity, but we don't talk about where the closest point of connection is?
If I'm not mistaken, Adolfo from Utilities is on and
Okay.
can speak to all of this.
Okay.
Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Commission members. I'm Adolfo Gonzalez. I'm the Utilities Engineering Contract Management Director. With respect to some of the questions you've asked, The information as far as what the available capacity of the plant is in the utility findings report, that's just based on what we have seen, based on developments that have come in over the last few years. We just track the potential wastewater demand, and we just keep a cumulative running total of that, and that 0.07 MGD is just an average over the last, I believe, 5 or 6 years. It could be more than that. In terms of planning for a plant expansion, there's two processes that we're looking at. One is the commitment that the county provides the developer when they request a sewer connection to Pasco County's utilities service area. And that commitment says, yes, but we have capacity, we'll provide that, we'll accept your flows or provide water to your development within as long as that permit is active. Now, the challenge that we have is that when we review and approve developments for, let's say, multifamily housing, single-family housing, mixed-use development, we don't know when those units are going to come online. If it's a very large development, it could be over 10 to 20 to 40 years' time. So we use that for just some preliminary planning as far as what our total commitment might be with respect to each wastewater plant. But what we're really tracking is actual flows at the wastewater plant and looking at population projections for that wastewater plant service area. And then when the population projection curve intersects the permitted capacity of the plant, whenever that time frame is, we back up from there to start planning the next plant expansion. What I think we have done incorrectly, and it might be confusing, is in the table in these findings, that uncommitted capacity, that should not be zero. I mean, to some people, it might infer that there's no capacity left at that wastewater plant, but there is capacity based on our population projections and compare that with the actual existing flows to the site. Does that make sense?
So how are you making the population projections?
We get that information from the University of Florida Bureau of, Eric, can you pull up the graphic that I have?
Do you not track the number of units we approve and that the Board of Commissioners approves down here? I can't tell you, I can tell you that I've been on this commission a little more than a year, and I will be willing to bet that there's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 20,000 units. And I will agree that they won't all go to the Shady Hills wastewater treatment facility, but we've approved a lot of units. And I guess what I'm asking, is there communication from planning and development over to utilities? I'm not saying anybody at utilities has done anything wrong here or anything, but it seems to me they need the data. They're relying on the University of Florida to tell them how many units we've approved or the commission's approved that are coming online? That's scary.
No, it's more of a reference point. We look at population projections, convert that to an estimated demand per person, and then convert that to an equivalent residential unit, and use that and track that against the actual plant flows. And this graphic you see up on the screen shows plant flows in black and different curved lines for estimated population projections. When the population projection, and in this case, we use the median projection from the University of Florida. Once we figure out what that estimated population increase is, convert that to some wastewater demand, compare that to the wastewater flows as it's tracking over time. When those two lines intersect at where the plant capacity is, we back up from there to start planning the next plant expansion. The letters of commitment and the approved equivalent residential units that are referenced in the planning documents, it's hard to tie that to when a plant may need to be expanded because we just don't know whether that development is going to occur over the next 5 years or the next 20 or 30 years.
But in the statement that's included in our memorandum, it says you commit the capacity when they actually apply for a construction permit for the development. Well, I don't know what, in general, the DEP permits are valid for 5 years. Our preliminary and our construction plans here are valid for, is it six years? So this isn't something that's 40 years, it's within 6 years.
That's, the DEP permit is, I believe, valid for 5 years. The letters of commitment, which is the county's obligation to provide that service to an applicant, I believe that time frame is 2 years. They have to actually start construction within 2 years and then finish it within a certain time frame. So that it doesn't have an undefined date. It's tied to when construction will start. If that doesn't occur within that time frame, that capacity is freed up for other developments.
So if someone hasn't built in the 2 years, do you add capacity back to the plant? I mean, does someone keep track of those commitment letters and say, oh, your 2 years is up, the capacity goes back to the plant and you lost yours?
We track it from the permit standpoint. We let the applicant know that his or her permit is about to expire. But we track the available capacity of the plant based on population and actual plant flows, changes in plant flows over time.
Could I ask a question that may help? I don't
Yeah,
know.
go ahead,
So,
David.
because I think these University of Florida Bieber numbers are used for multiple planning purposes, not just utilities. I guess I'll ask our planning department, have we ever exceeded Bieber high projections? I don't, historically in Pasco County, are we Bieber low, Bieber medium, or Bieber high? And have we ever exceeded Bieber high? Can somebody answer
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, I was going to ask Adolfo the same thing. How has this historically performed?
Because
type of-
my understanding, I only know this from MPO world. I don't, because they use the same projections, same population projections. My recollection is that we never have exceeded Bieber high, but I would like somebody from the planning department to confirm that.
I don't know that we can necessarily answer that directly. We tend to get that information elsewhere, I believe. I don't know if you want to speak to that?
Yes, Jeffrey Jenkins, Long Range Planning. Typically, I'm not sure that we've ever exceeded the Bieber projections. We try to stick with the medium. But I don't know of any case where we've ever had our population exceed that Bieber high. At least the 5 years that I've been around.
I guess my point is, I don't know that, I realize they come from the University of Florida, but I don't know that their population projections are inaccurate. The reason there's 3 different levels, low, medium, and high, is because that's kind of the range. If we have a high growth, we're in closer to Bieber high. If we're low growth, recession, it may end up being Bieber low, but I don't know that we've ever gone above the highest projection. I wish somebody could definitively confirm that from the planning department, but that's my recollection from discussing this issue at MPO.
How long has this method been used?
Bieber?
For projecting, at least with utilities?
I don't know about utilities, but it's frequently used by the planning department and MPO for population projection. It is the definitive population projector in the state of Florida. It's well recognized as the.
And that may be. All I'm saying is if they're saying that they only see a 0.07 MGD flow increase at the plant each year, that's only 350 residential units based on the numbers out of their own book. Nobody's going to tell me there's not more than 350 residential units coming online in that area.
Are they saying they're predicting that, or are they saying that that's what was historical?
They're saying that's what they've seen over the last few years as the average annual increase in flow at the treatment plant.
Right.
Well, then either the sewers are leaking bad and the water's disappearing.
Or there's a lot of people on
Or there's a lot of,
septic.
well, I don't think that's the case. We're not approving a bunch of dwelling units in here on well and septic. No, we're not putting them on those 40-foot wide lots.
That's
So,
true.
Just have it come online.
We haven't had a bunch of people come in here and ask for half-acre lots. In fact, I can't remember any, but other than the one zoning today for the AR1s, thank you to that guy. But
Sir, the 0.07 million gallons per day is an average of the equivalent residential units that we have been seeing and approving over the last 5 or 6 years. So it's not necessarily the change in the rate of flow at the plant, it's the average number of units that are approved in either a comp plan or a site plan once it gets to the construction stage.
350?
I believe that's what it is for this service area, this particular wastewater plant.
And are you seeing that same 0.07 going forward?
Well, that's a good question. And take a look at that graph. If you look at the black line and compare it to those Bieber projections, you've seen an uptick just in the last year. The slope of the line has increased. So, it's changing on a year by year basis in terms of how the construction market is changing in Pasco County. But what we use for planning purposes is that middle curve, that Bieber middle median projection line. We need to fix something to then start planning it for future growth and expansions.
I'm gonna leave that all to them, and I'll drop it right here. All I know is I got a staff report that says you have 0 uncommitted capacity. And then I got an explanation that the numbers don't make any sense. They think they're fine.
No,
That's
I
good,
understand.
but we gotta
you-
figure out how to communicate that. Because you
We will
got,
clarify that
you
information.
got a public out here that's concerned that there's not a, they see development going on everywhere. And I can tell you the number one question that I get if I talk to somebody about my activity with the Planning Commission is, where is all of the water coming from and where is the wastewater being disposed of? And so, and then I get a document that says you have 0 capacity. Maybe that's just a miscommunication. It appears by what you're saying that that's what it is. I'll just suggest that you guys need to figure out how to communicate it to me, to the board, to the public. Because when I see 0, it means we're out. We ain't got any.
Yeah, and it's not just out by a little, I mean, it's out by.
It's out by a lot. You have negative uncommitted capacity. You have 22 something MGD uncommitted
Almost 2 times,
capacity
I mean,
with a plant of 14.
Approaching 2 times the plant
This
capacity.
isn't the first time
So-
we've seen this either.
Well, and Adolfo, could you address my question? Because I haven't even heard definitively whether there's potable water and sewer lines anywhere near this particular property. And is there a reason when we get utilities comments on these plan amendments, you're not identifying the closest point of connection? Because we had the same issue with 7 Diamonds, where we get a comment that there's all this no plant capacity. But then the applicant gets up and says, I have no plan to ever connect to that plant. I'm gonna be on well and septic. So, because the closest point of connection was so far away. So, is there a way that when we get these utility comments on these plan amendments, you all can identify the closest point of connection and whether you'd be okay with it being on well and septic if there isn't a close point of connection? Because it's very deceiving to the public and planning commission to be putting in plant capacity if the whole world knows it's gonna be well and septic. So can you tell
We
me?
typically do not provide the applicant information as to where the closest point of connection would be at the comp plan review stage. That I believe our standard findings include statements that will be determined at the time that they come in for construction documents to be reviewed by our department. And then the standards and the ordinance requires the applicant to extend utilities within a certain distance of Pasco County's utility infrastructure. We historically haven't provided that at the comp plan stage. We can certainly provide that if it's your desire.
Well, I just don't want to have another situation where we're talking about plant capacity, and then we hear that you've had conversations with the applicant that they're gonna be on well and septic, and so what was the point in providing plant capacity numbers? So, yes, I would prefer that you be putting, I think it's material to the planning commission's decision about whether a project is going to be on well and septic or county water and sewer. I don't know how we would ever know that from these staff reports. And we figured it out from 7 Diamonds, and only because the applicant got up and told us. we never would have known that from the staff report. So in this
Understood.
case, the
We'll
applicant
clarify that.
doesn't know because I guess they are not far enough along on the development process, but I feel like the planning commission should know how realistic it is that they're gonna be on county water and sewer in this location.
Yeah, it might be a moot point if that's the case.
Because
Makes sense.
poor Mr. Moody over here is concerned about our plant capacity. He may not be as concerned if they're on well and septic.
No, and I would tell you for this size property, I don't really have that big a concern. It's the next 1,000-unit MPUD that comes through here where I got a concern.
Right, but my point is I agree with you, but I'm just
This is
saying,
what raised your concern in the first place.
I'm just
whether
saying,
it's
if the project were on well and septic, this particular project wouldn't necessarily be eating into that plant capacity.
Correct.
So would you agree that it's knowledge you'd like to have?
Yes, I would have,
Definitely.
no, I wouldn't have asked the question if I didn't.
Okay.
And again, my bigger concern is, this is small potatoes in the water and wastewater issue as far as the size of this particular development. They can probably get away, I have no idea what they're gonna put there since this is a Euclidean zoning, but it's the next big development that comes through. Do we actually have the capacity there? When I read this, it says we don't. And maybe I'm misunderstanding the whole .07 MGD, but I know what that adds up to, and I know we're approving, and I know there are under construction, not permits. There are building permits issued and projects under construction that are going to add way more than .07 MGD of flow to that particular wastewater treatment plant. And maybe it's just a miscommunication, and the next time it comes back here, this is all clarified. But it needs to get clarified, because that's scary when you tell me there's no uncommitted capacity. Actually, that you have negative uncommitted capacity.
So when we get to the stage of a motion, do we need to put these suggestions?
Well, I still would like to know if Adolfo knows where the closest point of connection is to this property.
For sewer, it's right along US 41. There's a 16-inch force main on 41, adjacent to the east frontage of the property. For water, the closest point of connection would be a little bit farther south at the entrance to Talavera.
So within a mile or so, or less?
Let me check. A little over a mile.
And the sewer runs along the railroad line, is that what you're saying?
You said it's in the right-of-way of 41?
On 41, yes.
How far north does that go? Because apparently it doesn't go up to Seven Diamonds.
It goes up to, I believe, I don't know the name of that first east-west road north of that development. Actually, it's not a road right now. It continues approximately a third of a mile north of this development.
Okay. And I guess I'll ask the engineers on planning commission, is a mile a reasonable distance to connect to water where it's feasible?
Depends on the size and scale and scope of your project. If I'm doing the 1,000-unit MPUD, yeah, probably not so much. If it's a metal building for an electrician, probably is too much. I don't know what's gonna go here.
Okay.
The comprehensive plan has some threshold distances depending on the wastewater and water demand. Depending on the number of equivalent residential units will dictate whether, if utilities are within a half mile, a mile and a half away, an applicant has to connect to those systems.
Okay. Well, I think on a going forward basis, if you can at least include the closest point of connection, I think that would be helpful.
Will do.
it looked like you looked it up in within 5 minutes. You did, it wasn't a lot of work, was it?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. So is there anything else on this? Barbara, did you have anything else? And was there, I don't think there was anybody else here to speak to this. Okay. Any other questions from up here?
I don't have a question, I have just an item to note that we did receive a MPUD application for a project at about half a mile north of this, and it's 2,100 single-family detached units, so it will be coming in at some point. We did the review in April of this year.
More than 350 in it.
2,100 units,
7 years
single-family detached.
So at least we'll order big enough.
So you'll be seeing that.
Well, I might as well vote against that right now. Okay. So if there's no further discussion, I'd like to hear a motion, please.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Not all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Adolfo. Have we got to the crucial time?
Yeah,
Well,
there's
again,
a last item on your agenda, which is a presentation for the 2050 comp plan, and that will be done by Hyatt Mazzilli.
Okay, very good.
Hope you enjoyed that discussion, Barbara.
Now she knows where her water and sewer are. She learned something.
She actually got a preview before the.
I knew you were here for some particular reason, so.
Yeah, a fun reason.
Oh, good.
So on to the fun presentation.
All right.
Good afternoon, Hyatt Mazzilli Planning and Development, and I am joined today by Nick Hill, our consultant planner with Inspire Placemaking Collective. Nick is actually a Pasco native. He is a Cypress Cubby and a River Ridge Knight, and he is as invested in the comprehensive plan and in Pasco 2050 future as we are all. So.
Glad to be back. Good. Welcome.
So both of us are very excited to present to you Pasco 2050, what we have been up to, what we've done so far, what we heard from the community. And I will start the presentation, and Nick is going to finish it, so I'll be up here for a while. Hope you guys don't mind. Okay.
So
All right, so
listen,
while...
before you start then.
Yes.
Let's take a 5-minute break.
Okay, sounds good.
Because you said you'd be.
Tell me when we're ready.
We're ready. Okay,
Reconvene.
awesome. Commissioners, my name is Hayat Mazzilli, or Planning Commission members, my name is Hayat Mazzilli. I am a planner with Long Range Planning and Development, and we will be talking today about Pasco 2050. So I hope that you all know that Pasco County is in the process of updating its adopted comprehensive plan or existing comprehensive plan, which has not been updated since 2006. So we're way overdue for an update. The planning process began in 2020, and it is slated for completion in 2025 with the adoption of a new comprehensive plan or an updated comprehensive plan, Pasco 2050. So the plan will establish a shared vision for growth, community development, economic development, as well as conservation of natural resources through 2050 with supporting policies, objectives, and strategies. So the purpose of this presentation today is to brief you guys about the public input that we have gathered and received through multiple engagement opportunities that we have done in the past 6 months. About 6 months. Also, we would like to get your feedback, and we would love to know your vision for Pasco 2050, and of course, ask us any questions. So let's get this presentation started. So what's in store for you today? We're going to be talking about the project scope, the schedule, and we're going to get to the meat of this presentation, which is the engagement summary and the public input. And then we're going to have a discussion. That's why I have this board over here. So class will be in session, just to get your feedback and what your vision is for Pasco 2050. And then we'll talk about the next steps for Pasco 2050. All right, so where are we now? We are in year 3, which we call the visioning year. So this is year 3 of the 5-year planning process. This is the most important year. Also, it is my favorite year because this is when we do the most public participation and the most interactions with the community. That's when we know about their aspirations, their concerns, and their perspectives of Pasco County. So this input is what help us establish a vision for the future. And this vision sets the stage and pretty much help us in drafting the plan in year 4 and in year 5 as we go through data analysis, we crunch the numbers, and we craft new policies as well as update the existing policies that's going to help us achieve this community vision and make it a reality. As far as where we are in year 3 of the visioning process, so these are the milestones as you see on the schedule. We are right now talking to you, the Planning Commission. We are briefing you on the community input, and we will be having one-on-one briefings with the commissioners in the next 2 weeks. Then we're also working on a draft vision statement, which will be available in October. I want to bring to your attention that the visioning process did not take us a whole year. We actually did it in 8 months. And the reason why we did it in 8 months is because year 3 started late because of fiscal constraints that were out of our control. So we pat ourselves in the back for doing this in only 8 months when we had 12 months to do it. Okay, so the vision document that we will be presenting in October is actually compiled of the community input and, of course, the community vision. So we got this input because we have done all this awareness efforts. So the numbers on the screen show the advertisement and the outreach efforts that we have done to bring attention to the comprehensive plan update. So we've done 6 presentations to different groups with different interests in the county and in different geographic areas of the county, including a USF presentation to grad students. We did 4 community pop-up events, 4 newsletters and media blasts, 3 press releases advertising the public workshops, and we had 14 media mentions, including an NPR interview during their segment of Florida Matters. And we had 74 social media posts, including Facebook and Instagram. Another number that's not on this slide is the number of the flyers that we had disseminated all throughout the county, including a grocery store, which I went and actually started giving out the flyers for the public workshop, and that number is about 500 flyers. We believe that the public outreach was successful because the engagement, these are the numbers that show the public engagement that we have gathered and got so far. So the numbers on the screen or on this slide speak for themselves. We had over 275 participants at our public workshops. We held 36 workshop activities. 1,186 community surveys were taken on our websites. There were 10,354 website visits. 1,024 reports were downloaded. And 444 people registered on our website so they can get updates and check out the reports that are on the site. And fun fact, the number 444 in numerology signifies evolution, revolution, and change. So I'd like to think that it's a good omen that, you know, we are doing something good and we are on the right path to change Pasco County for the better.
All right, I won't register then after this.
Yeah, let's keep it at 444. That's a good number. Okay, so this slide shows the different engagement opportunities that we provided for our community members. We talked to our community through our project's website, interview sessions, focus group meetings, as well as the county-wide workshop series that we held throughout the county. And I will go through each and every one of these in subsequent slides. So input of all of these engagement opportunities, or the summary of input of all these engagement opportunities is on our website, pasco2050.com. You can scan the QR code and it will take you directly to our site. Our project's website is actually a fantastic source for reports, project-related reports, county reports. It also has population projections, which Mr. Goldstein was asking about earlier. We also have the community survey on our website, and there's a forum where residents can interact with each other and talk about what they like and dislike, and also their vision for Pasco 2050. Interview sessions. So we had multiple interview sessions with different individuals that run the gamut from business owners, nurses, teachers, to community activists, and a young college student who is aspiring to be a county commissioner. We discussed a wide range of topics. And these are the topics that were discussed, and let me tell you, these individuals had a lot to say about each and every topic. Focus groups, we held focus groups with the Pasco Economic Development Council, Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, the Land Use Roundtable, which comprises of local lawyers, land use lawyers, and land use planners. And we also talked to the MPO, which included TAC, Technical Advisory Committee, Bike Ped Committee, as well as the Citizen Advisory Committee. Now, the public workshops. We hosted 3-part countywide public workshop series, and each part had a specific theme. The first part was about answering the question, where are we now? The first 2 public workshops of the first part were actually at St. Leo and in Holiday. We had great attendance at both of these workshops. We did not actually expect to get this many people. And attendees were given a brief presentation about the comprehensive plan, the importance of updating the comprehensive plan, and the importance of their input in actually shaping the vision for Pasco 2050. We then did a series of activities with them where they were able to identify and talk to us about the current conditions in the county, what they like and dislike about the county, as well as any other concerns they have. So that was done by answering that question, where are we now? And I'm gonna go briefly over some of these comments that we got from the community. And this is when we asked them to share their likes and dislikes and the changes that they'd like to see in the county. So they want to preserve the rural character of the county. They want maintenance of existing infrastructure. They want to protect the natural resources of the county. And they want housing opportunities for all income levels, and as well as housing opportunity or employment opportunities, for everybody in the county. They also want to have dynamic, walkable places, and they want a safe and robust transportation system. They also want us to improve, or want the county to improve resiliency against natural hazards. And also, they want expansion of the parks and recreation and the open spaces. And they also talked about the aesthetics of the new development. They want to see nice architectural design for new developments and structures in the county. The second workshop series also included 2 public workshops that took place at Shady Hills and Inland Lakes. Also, we had great participation at both of these public workshops. And this public workshop actually built off the first 2 public workshops. So each part of the workshop series built off each other. It wasn't just by itself. So participants in this workshop, they engage in activities to answer the question, where do we want to go? So we also did a presentation with them and a recap of the public input that we got from the last 2 public workshops. And they were able to look at that input and develop a community or a priority list for the community. One of the activities that was very popular among the participants at both public workshops was this base map activity. We gave them a blank map of the county and asked them to identify areas where they'd like to see future residential and non-residential development. And they literally took the markers and were trigger happy with doodling everywhere where they'd like to see future development and where they'd like to keep certain areas protected and conserved. Also, it was interesting to see how they interacted with each other at the table and how they kind of set aside their indifferences and worked collaboratively to complete this map. We also asked them to rank the community priorities that we got from the last 2 public workshops, and in the top 5, number 1, and these are the top 5, number 1 was preserve natural resources, number 2, increase transportation efficiency, 3, protect rural lands and character, 4, grow the park system, and at number 5, we got a tie between strengthening resiliency against natural hazards and creating walkable and vibrant places. And these are the other community priorities that came 7, 8, 9, and 10. I went too fast. Okay. So the last series of the public workshops was part 3, and part 3 was focused on answering the question, how do we get there? So now that we know where we are, where do we want to go, now we engage with the public in activities to answer this question. And I will hand it to Nick to actually continue on this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon, Planning Commission. My name is Nicholas Hill, planner for Inspire Placemaking Collective, and also the assistant project manager for Pasco 2050. And yes, proud alumnus of Cypress Elementary and River Ridge Middle and High School. So it's a real pleasure to be back here, truly. As Hyatt mentioned, this year is about the visioning process. Part 1, ask the public, where are we now? And ask them to identify the issues and opportunities affecting the community. Part 2, ask them, where do we want to go? And allow them to identify the top 10 priorities for Pasco County moving forward. And Part 3 was, how do we get there? Where they worked collaboratively as a group to try and develop and rank strategies for how they can achieve those 10 priorities. What you're about to see is just a sample of some of the most popular strategies as written and ranked by members of this community. So as I mentioned, the public was very concerned with preserving natural resources, and the most popular community-driven strategies, as written and ranked by members of the communities, involve stronger tree preservation regulations, cultivating wildlife corridors, the protection of productive aquifer recharge areas, and increasing efforts to monitor, protect, and increase the county's water supply system. They also desired increased transportation efficiency by improving crossings over U.S. Highway 19, identifying opportunities to increase the interconnectedness of our roadway systems, and fostering greater transit, sidewalk, and trail connections. Whether or not they were in the rural area or the urban area, we also heard tons of folks say protect rural lands and character. And some of the most popular ideas for achieving that was limiting increases in maximum permitted densities within the rural areas, maintaining that rural overlay, the Northeast rural overlay, working with agricultural property owners to develop incentives for placing portions of their property in conservation, and evaluating and refining standards for solar farming. They also wanted a robust park system by the year 2050 by identifying land acquisition opportunities for new parks, requiring the provision of on-site parks and recreation facilities for new large-scale developments, increasing the connectivity of multi-use trails, and expanding programming catered to our most vulnerable populations. They also want to work with property owners to explore eliminating regulatory barriers for redevelopment, strategically reducing minimum living areas, as well as permitting additional housing types within select residential zoning categories, and identifying and working with developers to make sure our most vulnerable populations have housing to accommodate them. They also want vibrant and walkable places, as Hyatt said. They want to work with developers to establish town centers, permit limited commercial developments within close proximity to neighborhoods so that they can walk or bike to meet their daily needs for goods and services. And they also want to refine landscaping character, or landscaping standards to match the character of the surrounding community. And they also want us to work with residents to identify opportunities for transitioning existing single-family neighborhoods into more mixed-use communities. They also wanted improved public and private spaces by establishing design and architectural requirements for new commercial and office buildings, protecting native trees, mitigating light pollution wherever possible, and addressing non-ADA compliant structures and infrastructure. They also wanted well-maintained public facilities. We heard repair our roads a lot. So they want us to increase funding for identifying and repairing dilapidated roadways, improving the amenities available at Go Pasco bus stops, increasing funding and service capabilities for our emergency management system, and preserving historical and indigenous sites wherever possible. They also wanted resiliency against natural hazards by limiting the proliferation of intense development in low-lying, particularly coastal areas of the county, expanding the stormwater management system here in the county, and increasing education and outreach efforts for hazard preparedness. Of course, they also wanted Pasco County's economy to be competitive by 2050 and remain competitive, so they wanted expansive employment and training opportunities by expanding upon the skilled trade opportunities available within the county, supporting programs for mentorship as well as training for high schoolers, expanding fiber optic internet services to employment centers, and evaluating and potentially expanding existing incentive programs for business recruitment and retention. So, but as we close out the summary of just this section, I just want to say we understand that some of these strategies are already being in place within the community. As such, we really just see this as an opportunity to evaluate their effectiveness and make the plan potentially improved by addressing those items. We also understand that the comprehensive plan may not be an appropriate place for some of those strategies, but we can certainly lay the groundwork within the comprehensive plan so that they can be implemented in a more appropriate manner later down the road. So we have a visioning session for you in just a minute, but first I just want to walk you through the next steps in this process. First, we're going to finalize that vision plan document, as Hyatt mentioned. We're going to present that to the Board of County Commissioners, and then we're going to publish it on the project website and share it community-wide. And once that's completed, we'll have everything we need to start the comprehensive plan update process later this year, beginning with the data analysis. So that being said, we do have the visioning session. Oh, yep, go ahead.
I just want to say something really quick before we start our visioning session, is that the visioning year does not stop, or the visioning process does not just stop in year 3. This is an ongoing conversation with the public. We are going to go back to them in year 4, and we're also going to go back to them in year 5, because the comprehensive plan is for the community and by the community. So we want them to be involved every step of the way, and we don't want them to be just as surprised by whatever we draft in the plan. Okay, and now class is in session. Let's start some of these questions.
So before you ask me the question, can I ask
Absolutely.
you a question? Do you know the answer to my Bieber question earlier? Because I'm still curious as to whether we're Bieber low, medium, or high, or
So just a little background for that process. When we do comprehensive plan updates, that's a conversation between us and staff first before we take it to the public, exactly what projection models we'll be using. It can be based off Bieber medium. That's usually the minimum as required by the state. Sometimes it's Bieber high, and sometimes it's based on housing permit data. So we will be doing that process as part of that. That being said, we did do some existing conditions within the community, and we didn't look at high specifically, but we did see that we vastly overgrew past the Bieber medium. We didn't look to see if that was also the case for Bieber high.
so it is possible that we may be exceeding Bieber high.
That is correct.
Thank you for that answer.
So, question for y'all too, or some surprised me, I guess, is it could be buried in there. I just didn't see it. So, workforce housing, I saw there was mention of affordability
That's
of
right.
housing. So, was there? I didn't necessarily see much discussion of that, but was there?
Yes, there was. Like I mentioned, these are just the most popular strategies. So I should mention that there's probably a total of 20 to 30 strategies written and ranked by members of the community, and we only showed the most popular ones. But yes, workforce housing did show up in those strategies and was a topic of discussion.
One area I didn't see was law enforcement and fire protection services. Did I miss that, or?
They believe that the fire department and the sheriff departments are doing a great job, and I heard that at the community events that I went to. So they had absolutely no concerns about the sheriff's department and the fire department, which gives us comfort that we are doing something great
Or there's
when it comes
no
to
criminals,
safety.
or there's no crime going on in Pasco County, I assume.
No.
Well,
Or if
Well,
there is,
from-
it's being adequately
addressed.
addressed.
That actually.
I don't even
surprises
think
me
the sheriff can tell you that he can prevent all crime,
I know that.
but part of his job is to investigate crime, and
Yeah, I came from that field, so, but I do have one question here. Let me put my glasses on, see if I can read my handwriting for a moment. You had internet services down, and that's important. I think of a number of us on this board concur with that. But each time we have a cell tower come before us, unless it's on school property, there tends to be a number of people who tend to oppose that because they don't want it in their backyard. And I can understand that. You know, maybe after I had one in my backyard, maybe I'd become used to it and therefore I wouldn't mind it. But I think that's important. I think internet service you had down there.
For sure.
And another one down is water. You know, reclaimed water needs to be, I think, increased significantly. I've heard that there's not sufficient quantities to go around to the whole county. But again, I think water is going to be a resource that will become significantly important to the growth of the county. I'll let others speak. I have more, but share the wealth.
To tag onto the internet thing, has there been discussion about public Wi-Fi areas within either, urban centers or?
When we were at the holiday workshop, they did talk about how there isn't that many free Wi-Fi in certain libraries, as well as the rec center, the J. Ben Hill Rec Center. So yeah, that was a topic of concern.
Because I know, in Newport Richey, in the city, they had discussed, citywide Wi-Fi and being able to distribute that out. It was a public thing, free to access by anybody, high-speed access. So I know that's come up as discussion in other urban areas, where the population's a little bit more densely clustered in the county.
Also the demographics, millennials.
Yeah, just to let you guys know, we do have a few places here in the county that are offering Wi-Fi services to areas covering their MPDs, their parks and different things, their trails within Connected City. Also, I believe Union Park down to the south also has it. There may be a couple others, but there are a few examples where they're working on that concept, and I think it's a good idea to look at, you know, Starkey Park and some of the other larger areas and other things to see if that's going to be something that's viable.
Yep, yeah, or for example, like Newport Corners, I'm thinking, you know, that corner section, right, where the commercial spots are going to be and where it's going to be walkable to, you know, some of those more publicly accessible where there's a density of population that would.
Yeah, there's a park, a linear park that will run kind of along the river down there, I believe, to the south too. So there would be some possibilities for something like this to really have an impact if it can be done.
That's great. So as you saw the public input, was there anything that resonated with you? Anything that surprised you? Since you hear this almost every single day.
That doesn't really surprise me.
I think what was surprising is that what it appears the public wants is not what we're here doing every day, and I'm not suggesting we shouldn't or couldn't, but
Well, oftentimes what the public wants doesn't merge with what the public is willing to pay for.
I 100% agree.
Mm-hmm.
I agree, but I found that to be a little surprising. I find it hard that they can say, we want to preserve the rural character of the county, but they can't buy 40-foot wide lots fast enough, and we can't build them fast enough to supply their need for them. I personally don't like the 40-foot wide lots, and I'd love for Pasco County to be the county I grew up in, but it's not anymore. So I just find that there's some inconsistency between what the market does, but yet what a session like this reveals. But I think that's probably because you only get a limited number of the population that actually participates.
Would you say,
Such
on
activity.
one
Oftentimes
hand,
you're talking
people
about two
want
different
open
groups of people,
space,
too.
and on the other hand, people want, hey, I want a new
housing,
house.
yeah.
So how do you make those two merge?
Yeah, there's a
Can't.
lot of competing interests. I mean, like, somebody will tell you they want affordable housing, but they want big lots.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of competing interests here.
Yeah, a
in
lot
the
of people that
development
want
of
to
these plans.
preserve the character of the people that live here already, whereas the 40-foot lot buyers are people that are moving in from out of the area.
Yeah, we did hear a lot of contradictions throughout all these public workshops and engagements, and it's like you said, everybody has a different interest, and we're not necessarily covering the entire population of Pasco County, so. Yeah.
So was the engagement pretty consistent? It looked like, based on the pictures you took, is you well represented in all areas of the county for the
Yes.
most part?
Yes.
That's good to see.
So
Yeah.
how many total people did you meet with at these workshops?
275. And sometimes,
175.
and these are just the people that actually registered at the front before we started the presentation. More people came after the registration has ended, and they participated in just the activities or they missed the presentation. So I'll confidently say that we had about 300 people show up to all 8 workshops.
And the population of the county is?
I know.
Yeah.
Can you flip back to the 10,
Yeah, that's that too, yeah.
the slide of the 10, top 10 things, just so
Of
we can
course.
be looking at it while we're.
The ones that they ranked by importance to them, okay.
I guess to John's point, I mean, Derek and I are both heavily involved in Rotary. He's going to be our next district governor for this area. I mean, is there a way or an opportunity for us to help? You know, we've tried to do that. Obviously, you came and spoke at our Rotary Club and the like, so we've tried to do that. But, you know, to John's point, I mean, is it fairly confident that it's reaching the people, but getting them to engage more is.
I was kind of holding this till after this discussion, but maybe now's the time.
Okay.
In the last 2 months, there's a group of 18,000 plus people who have formed a group on Facebook called Pasco Development and Growth.
Yep.
Last week, their membership increased by 850 some odd new members.
Yep.
So there is a group of people that are following what we do, and if any of them are watching right now, I will tell you that making wild accusations about the county commissioners or the planning commissioners is not going to solve your problems. Come out here to these meetings, that the way a democracy works is with your participation. Come out, we listen, we hear. As I told the pastor from the Shady Hills Methodist Church, she is being heard, and there are things that are happening as a result of her participation. So I would tell them the same thing, to come out. But that's 18,000 people. Maybe if you try out reaching out to them, although I would tell you be careful, because some of them can get, reading the comments, they're a little hostile. Some of them are.
But that makes a lot of sense, social media engagement, you know, this is
Very important.
2023, right?
Yeah,
So,
it's been very important. And I actually want to thank them for actually advertising the public workshops and Pasco2050.com. Somebody just posted 3 days ago about our public workshops and also about our, the survey, the community survey that they can take. So somebody urged everybody to take that community survey. So thank you to whoever.
I did want to ask you one question about that, and that is, do we have a potential sunshine law problem if people on the planning commission or the county commission are participating in that group?
Only if there's dialogue between two. In other words, if individual planning commission members are posting their thoughts in a survey, if it's an anonymous survey, there would be never an issue. But if it's a survey where you're identifying yourself and providing your comments, the only way you get into a sunshine law problem is if then other planning commission members are commenting on your.
I'm talking about this Facebook group. This is not a survey.
Same thing with Facebook. Okay, so Facebook, if you are posting your thoughts on Facebook and then another planning commission member is responding to your thoughts, yes, that is a sunshine law problem. If individual planning commission members are posting their thoughts and there's no responses or dialogue between them, probably not a sunshine law problem, but I still wouldn't recommend it. In other words, because the problem is you may post something and then somebody else posts something, then there's a whole thread below your post talking about X, Y, and Z. Somebody else responds to one of them, but it ends up really being a response to you. Because if you don't follow those threads of dialogue carefully, you may not realize you're effectively engaging in a dialogue with another planning commission member. So my general advice would be to you, to the extent you want to participate in something like that, an anonymous survey would be fine, because you're just anonymously, just like any other citizen. But as soon as you're engaging in a dialogue, we know for certain the comp plan will be coming to this body. That's undisputed. So it is foreseeable that this amendment to the comp plan that results from this effort will come before you, so you can't be engaging in dialogue about something that could result in an amendment to the comprehensive plan.
So anyways, all I'm suggesting that, I don't know whether you participate in such a group, and I don't know if I'd recommend participating in such a group, but I glean a lot. I kind of seeing,
It's interesting.
scrolling, and I don't know how representative that group is of the 550,000 plus that are in the county, but there's 18,000 of them that have sprung up in 2 months and gaining almost 1,000 a week. At least that's what last week is. That's a lot of feedback in a very short time.
John, do you know the location of the 18,000, or is it kind of like, I mean, is it like?
No, it just, if you go on the group site, it tells you the basic stats that the group's 2 months old, it has 18,000 members, and then it showed how many were in the last week, which was 850 something last week.
it could be from people all over, I mean,
It
people
could
that
be,
are
or it could be.
considering.
Right, I have no idea whether those are 18,000 Pasco. I believe they're Pasco County residents,
Probably
because
most
they
of
all
them.
seem to have a lot of familiarity with the area in the comments that they
Yeah,
post.
but if you have, you have the Holiday area, or you have the Dade City area, you have two different groups of people with different
Interests,
goals and
concerns.
backgrounds
Yes.
and
Well, actually, I think
livelihoods.
there's a lot of commonality amongst most of the comments that I see,
Right.
there's a lot of common themes. I don't want to say there's 100% unanimity out there, but there's a lot of commonality.
For sure, and these are actually the commonalities between all the different areas in the county. This is what we got from all of them.
To the chairman's point, though, is there a reason you didn't ask the question, which of these would they be willing to spend taxpayer money on? I mean, because where I think there's a disconnect is we just had a budget meeting on Tuesday, and we had hundreds of people in the audience saying they didn't want their taxes increasing for any of these things. So it seems like you got a group of people over here saying we want all these things, and to the chairman's point, they all cost money. But unless you know which of these things they're willing to put their money where their mouth is, I'm not sure how helpful it is. In other words, are they willing to pay additional taxes to grow the park system? Are they willing to pay additional taxes for transportation efficiency? I mean, without knowing that, anybody can create Santa's wish list can be 20 pages long, but there's only so many things that Santa can afford.
Right.
So, how do we know that from this survey?
Well, and to add on to that,
One of
too,
the-
it might.
Before we say anything else, let me just follow up on what he just said. I'm looking at this list, and really, items 1 through 7 can be, to a large extent, this group and the county commission can do a lot to impact those desires. The way we approve developments, I believe, and I've said for a long time, that what I hate to see, for example, is for development to be approved and they just go in and knock down all the trees. Right up there, it says preserve natural resources. It says protect rural lands and character, grow park systems. When we approve parks for schools, and it's a lot of these things. If you, out of the 10 most important, 7 of them, we have a lot to say about. So.
You certainly had a lot to say on number 4 when the park impact fee came to you.
Right, exactly. And
But we're also approving amendments or exceptions all the time for parks.
And that's why,
No, I don't disagree that there are things that you, on all of these, that when items come to you that affect these things, I'm only asking, how do we know which of these, even protecting rural lands, I mean, you could buy conservation easements from all the old agricultural landowners to make sure that we're preserving the rural lands of Pasco County, but that requires money.
Right.
So I can't tell whether they're willing to spend taxpayer dollars to do that.
You know why, David? Because most people, for some reason, they can't get it through their head that those taxpayer dollars aren't coming from the government. They're coming from people. It's not government. The government has no money. The people provide the money for the government. So if they want the government to do all these things, where are they going to get the money? They're going to have to get it from us.
But that's my point, is I think a helpful survey question would have been,
Yeah, what are you willing to pay for?
which of these are you willing to pay additional taxes for,
Rank
if
them at
any?
that level, yeah.
Well,
in that
we
manner.
actually asked, not directly asked that question in the public workshops, but when we were talking to folks just one-on-one, we did ask them, and they said that Penny for Pasco can pay for all of this that we want.
An inaccurate statement.
Right, but they believe that Penny for Pasco can cover most of
So
these.
that was going to be my follow or my add-on to that.
That's the painless answer, because they think, again, once again, penny for Pasco, where does that penny come from?
My add-on to that, is there any reason why you couldn't have a rough projection for costs for these things? So we'll say, because one thing might be completely cost prohibitive, another thing might be pretty easy,
So these are nebulous things. What do these?
Well, I
things- what does
understand,
this
you
mean?
could, but you could have.
Well, I mean, okay, there probably are 3 or 4 items on this list that I do agree Penny for Pasco. Number 1, number 8, to a limited extent, number 2, probably not the rest of these, okay? So if somebody told them the Penny for Pasco is gonna pay for all 10 of these things, that's just flat out wrong. We did. Okay, so for some of these, somebody's gotta make a financial decision about whether to, and our board has had debates about whether to increase taxes for any of these things. or to reduce taxes for some of these things, it'd be helpful to know, how do I know which of these they're willing to put their money where their mouth is?
So if I could just speak on that for a second. So we didn't do that as part of this year. However, in other jurisdictions, and certainly this is something that we can do for year 4, even in fact, we can put it on the website tomorrow even, is that we do have a list of priorities similar to this, and we have activities, an online survey, if you will, where they're allowed, given a limited number of tokens, funds, whatever you want to use, and they have to prioritize what they want to spend the money on. You can also ask them a survey question of rather, would you be willing to increase taxes to achieve each of these things? So those questions are good questions, and we can certainly ask them. It's just we didn't ask them in part of year 3.
You need to, because in my opinion, this is just a Santa's wish list.
Yeah.
That anybody can create a Santa's wish list and say, I want these 20 things. Until we know you're willing to put your money where your mouth is, it's meaningless to me.
And keep in mind, this is not a document that's just about the next 5 years and about the financial status of the county for the next 5 years. This is for 2050. So financial status could change over time, and you could have a lot more money in the coffers. This is a long-term vision document, right? This is a long-term
I agree
vision
with
for the
you, but
county.
even our MPO plan, we start with a needs plan,
Mhm.
okay, which is all the stuff that in theory that we might need in the future for roads and transportation.
Right.
But then we boil down to what we can actually afford.
Sure.
And that becomes our adopted long-range transportation plan. So even when you're looking in the future, just 2050, 2065, whatever it is, you should be able to identify what you can afford. And so I think our comp plan needs to be, somebody needs to put a reality check, a monetary reality check on our comp plan. And say, we can't just have a comp plan that says, these are all of the 1,000 things we want. We need to do something similar to what we do with our MPO plan, and say, this is what we can really afford to do based on what our taxpayers believe they're willing to pay money for.
Yeah, absolutely. We
So
can.
yes, I do think you need to ask the financial questions, because otherwise we have a huge disconnect between the 100 people that showed up saying they don't want their taxes increased and the 275 people that showed up and said, we want the moon, sun, and the stars.
Sure.
There's definitely a disconnect there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Could you address that in the capital improvements element?
We can, I mean, the capital improvements element does have to be
Yeah.
feasible, but the problem is that there's nothing stopping us from putting in a comp plan policy that may ask for the sun, the moon, and the stars, and we can't afford it.
Yeah, it's a pie in the sky thing.
So what's the point in putting it in if we can't afford it?
Well, and that's why I thought it would be a good idea to try to come up with a, I know these are nebulous, open-ended questions, but, it's going to be cheaper to grow the park system than it will be to increase transportation efficiency. So you can maybe do like they do for restaurants. That one has $3 signs, and this one has $1 sign.
You're describing the activity to a T.
So I would suggest that, because that's going to help them with their tokens and.
Absolutely, we can certainly do that.
I would say that all 10 of these, if you have enough money, you can achieve them.
Yeah.
Sure.
Unlimited
You do
funding.
anything with enough money and time, right?
But I still advocate for reclaimed water for the county. It should be a #1 priority.
Okay.
So should water.
Yes.
We can survive 3 days, but beyond 3 days with no water, you're either going to one place or the other. That's the bottom line. If anybody's been in the military or anyone who goes out hiking or anything like that, without water, you're not going anyplace. And and desalination plants are very expensive to build. And there is shortage of water in this area currently, So anyway, I will bounce that one until the day I go to the heavens.
It's a great one.
I think the
It's
thing I was
required by the
referring
state to be addressed in the
David,
comp plan.
on this is that I think in many cases, we aren't as hard as we should be on developers. If they want to come to Pasco County and they want to develop in Pasco County, they need to help us fill this list.
I don't disagree.
It's a fine line, because you can only do so much even with developers, because then their product will be too expensive for people to buy. But I think in the past, we have not required enough from, I'm talking about the big developers,
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. However, I will tell you that when the legislature has a habit of when we demand too much of developers, we get preempted. And so for example, legislature told us we're not allowed to regulate design on single-family homes anymore. So as much, even if the citizens said we want single-family homes to look better, legislature said, sorry, you can't do it. Parks, if we exact too much park land from developers and we don't give them credits against our park impact fee, then that might violate some state law. Same thing with roads. I mean, all of these things that the residents say they want, have we forced the developers to do too much of it?
So it's a fine line.
The legislature steps in and says, you took it too far, Pasco County, you're preempted. And they've already done that. So there's a limit, and there's also other legal limits in terms of takings law and Harris Act and things like that.
That's right.
But the bigger limit right now on us is the state legislature, that they tell us we can't do some of these things. And I don't even know if the public knows that.
I'm sure they don't. And I think, in many cases, rightly so, I think they have to put limits on what government can do. But, we just need to bear in mind that we have to do what we can do, and don't just let people go in and wipe out every tree on the property just to make it easier for them to
That's another
develop it.
example is where most of that is occurring is on agricultural lands.
Yeah.
There's a big loophole in that we can't really stop is.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
They clear cut the property while it's under an ag exemption. And that's very difficult for the county to step in and stop.
Right. And I know a lot of the property that we have is agricultural, and the timber's already been cut. It's a pasture, so, and I know in the earlier days, in the 60s, when we had the big freeze and all the orange trees were killed, those trees, there's no vegetation there because there were no trees there in the first place. And so, because you always had that thing, well,
We need to take into consideration, sometimes I get a kick out of, we take pasture land that didn't have trees. It may have some small, may have cypress heads here and there, but it's generally pasture land.
Yeah, big
Doesn't
oak
have,
once in a
the
while.
trees are few and far between, and then when we develop under the land development code, they're actually forced to put more trees than actually existed there prior to the development. And we have other problems in our code where we require a certain minimum number of species of trees in a development, even though the land in its existing condition may not even have supported that number of, and then I see crazy things like we put cypress trees on top of sand hills because we've got this code requirement that says you must have 8 native species if you need this many trees, and of course now I'm out of native species, and now I'm putting a tree that isn't possibly ever going to survive somewhere because the code required it.
Yeah.
I don't know what the answer to all that is the problem with codes is they try to be one size fits all, and unfortunately that's not the way of the world. But
Probably a land development code issue, not a comp plan issue.
And the comprehensive plan can lay the groundwork for changes to the land development code. So those are still important comments as part of the comp plan update. Does anybody have any other questions on this slide particularly? If not, we'll go back to the visioning session.
Okay.
All right. All right, so we kind of touched upon this a little bit already. I know with the reclaimed water comments and the water supply comments, thank you so much for those. Are there any other strategies that you feel that should be addressed within the comprehensive plan update? Like I said, there's a lot of strategies that's just not in this presentation, but it is available online to download and review to see what your public came up with. But I wanted to know from the Planning Commission, do you have any other ideas?
Just what I mentioned about the broadband connection and easy access to broadband internet connection, it's going to become more and more important as time goes, especially for those people that don't necessarily have access to it easily.
I think the answer to number 2 would be helpful if you show me in the current comprehensive plan, what are the strategies? When I read the comprehensive plan, I don't see a strategy for anything. What I see is a list of policies, some of which were forced upon us by the state legislature, to David's point. I don't know, I always get a kick out of it because we call it a comprehensive plan, and I'm not sure I see a plan for much. We've got a couple maps of vision roads and things like that here and there, and we've got a land use map, which in my personal opinion, was drawn without much thought, without any real planning. And unfortunately, what happened here is the way this is supposed to work is we're supposed to have a comprehensive plan and then have zoning on top of that, but the county had zoning in 1975 and then a comprehensive plan in 1989, so it happened exactly the opposite. And unfortunately, sometimes the comprehensive plan didn't line up with what the zoning was. And so we find us in here trying to adjudicate all of these issues where entitlements don't match up.
Yeah.
But I don't see, I guess what I'm asking about number 2 is, I don't see in the current comprehensive plan, what's the vision? All right, you're asking us now a vision and strategies to get there. I'm not sure I understand what the vision and strategies are in there. I just see a list of policies.
Sure, and I just want to mention that part of our purview for updating the comprehensive plan is cleaning up the document itself. There are a number of policy references and policies that were required by the state that are no longer required by the state, references to 9J5, things that are no longer required by the state. So we'll be addressing all of that, looking at reorganization and making sure that message of what the vision is for the county is clear. That is part of the purview of what we're trying to do here.
I mean, John, there are some, when they created the market areas, I think in 2008 or 10, I don't remember when that was.
Yeah, there's some vision that
There's some
happened there,
visioning
yeah.
that occurred there, and Northeast Pasco has a certain vision, that has certain policies associated with it. Pasadena Hills has certain visions and I mean, there is some visioning in the existing comp plan. I get your point, but the entire county is not equal. I mean, not all. The county did create an urban service area for a reason.
And a Northeast Rural Protection Area for a reason.
So there is a general vision of the areas we want urban development, suburban, and rural development. That occurred in the 2008, 2010 timeframe. What's probably lacking, though, is some of the details of what is urban, what is urban form, what is suburban form, what is rural form. The implementation strategies is probably what's missing. I think there is a defined areas of the county where we want urban, suburban, and rural development. And every staff report that comes to you tells you, hey, this is in the urban service area, this is in the.
And I think that would be helpful in your outreach to the public, in that we have these defined areas. I mean, if you're living in the urban service area and you're screaming, I need to preserve the rural character of the county, you're barking up the wrong tree.
I would like to make a comment. We did activities that spoke almost precisely to this. In the very first workshop series, we actually had an activity which asked them to show them a series of photos and asked them to define whether or not it's urban, rural, or suburban. And I don't think you'd be surprised to find out that there wasn't a lot of consensus as to what each of those terms meant within the context of those photos. So that was very enlightening to us. It helps during the visioning process, but it will really help during the data analysis when we start digging in what is truly urban, suburban, and rural. We also had an activity which we didn't show up on the screen that talked about growth and where new growth should be concentrated. We gave them a base map of the county, different from what you saw earlier in the presentation, where that new population growth they felt should be directed. And so we do also have that information. And so we'll be
They don't
utilizing
line up with our urban service area at all? Yes?
Some of them, yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, you can go ahead.
Sorry. Yes, some of them do want the development to be concentrated where there's already a lot of urbanized areas, such as the West Market area, and some of them want them to stay around the US 41, 52, 54, along those corridors. They also wanted us to direct population to the southern part of, or the Pinellas County, not necessarily stayed in our county.
Oh, they want us to put growth in another county?
Yep.
That's interesting.
That solves our problem.
Not in my backyard.
But the issue becomes property rights. If I own a piece of property, I want to do with it what I want, and if I can make $1 zillion off of it, why not? I mean, wasn't that our conversation almost a couple of weeks ago when we talked about a cell tower going up? And a gentleman said, hey, there's people that live up in St. Louis, Missouri, own this property, and that property will be developed at some point in time. We know that, it's a large acreage. And then there's also the ranches off of 52 and 41 in that area there, got a couple up there, got an airfield in there. You know, so what do you do about property rights? You know?
Well, but I think property rights doesn't mean you can just do whatever you want with your property.
Well, if you get a good
You have to do it within the constraints of the zoning code, the comprehensive plan, the land development code. So that's what you all are in charge of doing. I mean,
So, well, here's one of the things we'll be faced with, and I know this happened in the first comprehensive plan update. So we had a future land use map that was drawn in 1989, and that gave every piece of property in this county some entitlement or lack thereof for development. And then when the comp plan was updated again, where we found ourselves politically was, we already gave his piece of land an entitlement. I got a real hard time coming in and telling him, well, I'm taking 50% of that away. And I think that's where we're gonna find ourselves again. We're gonna have areas where there are certain entitlements, and we can't just walk in and these people bought this land, these properties with this expectation that these are the things I can do. And then you're just gonna come in and we can't just go in and wholesale say, well, we're changing all your entitlements now. Well, I guess we can, but the commissioners won't last long in their seats if they do that. So, and I think they know that.
I think that's more accurate for zoning than comp plan. I mean, there's a general principle that you're not entitled to the maximum that the comp plan allows. I mean, so just because you have Res 6 comp plan doesn't mean you're gonna get a rezoning that gives you Res 6 density.
No, they come in and they ask for MPUD, and then we give them the world.
But there's no obligation that you give them the world, is my point. I mean, it can't exceed what the comp plan allows, but there's no obligation. I mean, if there's, and you all have denied some rezonings where there's inadequate infrastructure to support what they want, and you say, no, we're not giving you Res 6 because you don't have central water and sewer, or your roads are not sufficient. So you have to remember that comp plan is the year 20, right now it's 2025, but it'll be year 2050. Doesn't mean that the infrastructure that is needed by 2050 is in place to support that level of growth today.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm just saying that's a problem that we're going to have to wrestle with as
But I do agree with you that it's difficult for us to, if somebody has Res 6 today, to
go
say
in and
we're
tell them
gonna,
it's
now
gonna
we're
be
gonna make
Res
it,
1.
now we're gonna make it Res 1. That's difficult to do.
Because there's a contingent of the populace that wants the area to remain in rural character. So I think we'll find ourselves in a difficult position to do that.
So.
And I would tell them, hey, I grew up here when this was a very rural area, and
What you tell them is you get your 18,000 people together and go buy the property. Then you can do whatever you want with
well,
it. You can keep it off the market
that's a
forever.
message that's a message that needs to be
So-
delivered to a lot of those people too. And I would
I do-
tell you that in my business, we have a saying that everyone is an environmentalist until they want a building permit.
Yeah.
So I do have one strategy that I think needs to be addressed in the comp plan. There's already existing comp plan policies that talk about preservation of land for economic development. And we've got a whole series of policies that discuss that about, because we're trying to become more than a bedroom community, and I support that. But my question is, at what point are we balanced? In other words, at what point have we preserved enough land for office, light industrial, commercial growth that maybe we don't need to preserve every square inch of the county for, I know we're not, but I mean, at what point is it okay to, because there's a presumption that we don't allow changes of industrial land to residential land. And that makes sense today. My question is, and I'm asking you as the expert, when is it okay that we start giving up some commercial or industrial land for residential land or residential uses?
Population growth?
Because it goes into the Affordable Housing issue and the Live Local Act, and I mean, our county currently is fighting the Live Local Act because it's converting industrial, commercial land to residential. And today, we already jobs deficit in the county relative to other counties.
That's right.
But my question that I think needs to be addressed is, when are we balanced? When are we gonna get to the point where it's okay for somebody comes in and says, I wanna convert an industrial piece to residential? We don't all start screaming and say, what the hell are you doing? I mean, I think we need guidance on when that becomes okay.
Yeah,
There's got to be an ideal mix, right?
that's right.
Well,
At some point, you must achieve balance.
that'll be decided by the people who live here.
That was going to be my next sentence.
Who is he to tell me when we've achieved that balance? Okay,
Well,
that's gonna be decided by the people when, we say we want industrial development, and we may find that becomes a case of we better watch what we wish for.
That said, though, you still have to try to plan for it.
I understand, industry covers a lot of things, okay? And it's all good, I know we'd like to have the biotech industries and electronics and all of that, but we're seeing some of it, but we're not seeing all of it, and that has to do a lot with national politics and, whether those jobs are in China or whether they're in the United States. But we also have to have a population that has the expertise to work in those fields too.
I don't disagree with you. I'm only pointing out that we have no measuring stick currently that says, hey, when the county gets to achieve this many acres of industrial land, that's probably sufficient. I don't want us to preserve industrial land just for the sake of preserving industrial land.
I think everybody, I guess what I'm trying to say is I think everybody has an opinion, and ultimately that's why we have a representative form of government. That opinion will get expressed at the ballot box. I've heard this over the years and living here my entire life, Pasco's nothing but a bedroom community. My response to that is, yeah, so what? I know what I live here, I choose to live here. If I didn't like living here, if I wanted it to be someplace else, then I'd move someplace else. So, but other people have this envision that maybe Pasco County should be a megalopolis like New York to Philadelphia. But ultimately, it's the people at the ballot box that will decide that.
Yeah, but our comp plan is supposed to set our vision for the future. And so I realize that comp plan can change.
We do it every day here.
Okay, right, but my point is that without a measuring stick that says we've achieved balance, I mean, I understand you're arguing we may not need balance, okay, but let's assume that we want to be generally balanced, that we don't have tons of people commuting out of Pasco County, okay, because that floods our roads. It's probably better for people to be able to work close to where they live. So, but I think there's probably some point at which we've preserved enough commercial and industrial land that there's no need to do it anymore, then it's okay for some of it to become residential. I'm asking him as the expert, what is that point? So I have some measuring stick to point to in the comp plan, when a developer comes up and says, it's okay to convert all my industrial land to residential, I like some measuring stick that says, well, have we achieved balance yet? Our comp plan currently doesn't say what our goal is. Shouldn't our comp plan say what our goal is for employment?
Well, that'll be, we could spend endless hours debating that.
I'm not suggesting, yes, I
think
understand
we
everybody
are.
can debate it. All I'm asking is our expert to come up with staff and our expert to come up with a recommendation. TBRPC did this study saying we need X amount of industrial land. Okay, is that the magic number? I don't know what there's nothing in our comp plan that says what the magic number is. I agree that you can disagree with, the board may not agree with that magic number, but without a magic number, I don't have any measuring stick to guide when these proposals come in.
It's not a hard number, it's just a guide.
At least the goal, like for parkland, we have something in our comp plan that says how much parkland we want to achieve. We have roads that say, these are all the roads we want to build for future growth. Why don't we have something similar for employment? It says, this is our goal for employment land in Pasco County. This is what we want to achieve.
You may.
What are your thoughts on that?
So I just wanted to make a few quick notes on that. I mean, this is the easy answer, but I agree with both of you for the record. There is different ways we can look at that, and we can certainly propose that in the data analysis of what that correct balance is, what we believe it to be, as well as what the literature says it should be. But to your point, at the end of the day, we have to bring that balance back to the public and say, this is the balance that we're going to shoot for in this comprehensive plan. And they can either tell us this is a bad idea, that's too much, too little, or something in between. And we have to bring that to the Board of County Commissioners and you folks as well who have to approve it. So just want to let you know it is, we can do the data on our side. We can certainly look that up for you, and we'd be happy to do that as part of the data analysis. And
One of the things we have to
that we
recognize
point
too is the natural growth of communities. And I found it interesting, a survey landed in my email box this morning asking what were the obstacles to TND development. Well, I would tell you that the responses, that the boxes that you can check in the responses to the survey have nothing to do with that. The problem with TND development is you're trying to create a town, you're putting the cart before the horse. Towns spring up around, generally, they're geographic. It's around major routes of transportation. New York City is not where New York City is by accident. It's around a harbor. Tampa, the same thing. It's around the bay, okay? Chicago, it's on the Great Lakes. The whole goal of these TNDs is we're all going to work and live in the same community, and there are very few of them that have actually achieved that goal. And the problem is you can't just say, I'm going to build a new town here. There has to be some impetus for that. And that's why I don't believe that theory has worked. And so, David, back to the question you were asking, there were no engineering jobs in Pasco County other than Mr. Cassin's firm here when I first came out of college. So my engineering opportunities were in Pinellas and Hillsborough County. Do you know why I live in Pasco County? Because it was cheaper. And as the jobs come to Pasco County, there'll be a whole bunch of people that run to Hernando County and to Citrus County, and you know why? Because it'll be cheaper. Because that's how it happens naturally. And we have to have planning that recognizes what the natural growth, what the natural progression of these things are. Planning doesn't happen just because we say, well, we think this should be here because we said so. That's not how it happens in the real world.
Unless you're the villages.
Correct, but then in their case, they brought their industry's retirement, right? We think of industry as making things, but their industry's retirement, and so they're able to do it. And Celebration is a great example of a TND that works. Why? Because it's the house of mouse, right? But that's not everywhere.
I agree with you somewhat, but you also have to take into account that what may occur naturally may not be the best thing. So I'll give you an example. Tampa Bay Golf and Country Club, right next to the residential development right next to the interstate. That might have been a good place for light industrial distribution, but
absolutely.
But at the time, the market said, we're gonna put houses there. Okay, so I agree with you, you need to allow nature to take its course, but you still have to make sure that you're preserving some land for when employment's ready to come to Pasco, the ideal locations for that employment are still available for employment. They're not taken up with a bunch of houses.
Well, that's where the planning part comes in. For instance, if one wants to have industry, and I said this when we had the Seven Diamonds case a month or so ago, last time we were here in Newport, Richey, I was very pleased to see that that proposed industrial park was along a rail line. They're gonna propose to make concrete products. They get their sand, they're gonna get their aggregate out of their mine, but that Portland cement, which is the other key ingredient that they need, is gonna come along that rail. And so if Pasco County wants to have industry, you have to set the table for industry to happen. Industry requires major routes of transportation to get raw materials in and finished goods out. And then we have to say, well, wait a second, well, that happens in Tampa because they have a port. We don't have a port in Pasco County. What we have is highway, and we have the potential for rail, or we have the potential for air. Look at the industrial development that's going on in Hernando County and around the airport up there, right? Because they've used that major transportation. We have to set the table for those things. Unfortunately, and I'm not suggesting that the old West Pasco Airport was the right place, but that was an air park. It's now neighborhoods and Trinity. Maybe we need to be investing in the Zephyr Hills Airport. Look at Polk County is doing with its airport and the industrial growth that's going on around it. Are we working with CSX to attempt to find an area where we can bring in a rail spur so that we can have industry that relies on those things? Unfortunately, US 19 is not a good route to get raw materials in and finished goods out. And the Suncoast Parkway, where's it go?
But we do have I-75.
Right, I-75 is a plus to us, that's
We
correct.
have rail there, you mentioned rail.
But we've only got so many interchanges that they can go at.
Well-
And I'm pleased, I'm seeing, a lot of these things are happening at these interchanges, that's natural. But we've got to provide some other places for these things to happen.
Yeah, I think the one thing you touched on, that the county should be thinking about is a citizen airport where businesses can come and go, executives fly into their corporate offices and so forth. That hurt us, I think, when we lost West Pasco Industrial, even though it was a small airport.
Yes.
You did mention Zephyr Hills, and that airport is a very good airport to utilize for growth.
But it doesn't service this side.
It's hard to service, I think what Chuck is
Because of
saying, it's hard to service
transportation,
this.
is that what you're saying? It's too far,
County.
too far out?
Yeah, Central County would be the
We need
perfect
some,
spot
I
for
mean,
something like that.
if you could expand Pilot Country, for example, that would be a better location.
It's a good spot, but of course it's private, so.
So I think to sum up, I think a better plan for employment and the infrastructure that needed to support employment, like rail, like airports, highways, I don't think that's well thought out in our comp plan currently.
No,
Right,
I think that's what I'm trying to say.
exactly.
I think part of the
Summary of that.
Part of the problem has been that Florida has always been a state that people retire to die. I know when I retired some wait, give me a minute. When I retired out of the agency that I worked for before, my friends knew I was going to go to one of two places, Arizona or Florida. And they said, oh, you go to Florida, you're going to go to die. And, the community I live in, you talked about Tampa Palms up just a few miles from where I live at. The community I live in is basically a retirement community too. They have Pulte Homes built two products. Homes for families in large homes, which were about 2,500 square feet. And the other one, which is the majority of the retirees live in, is your 1,000 square foot, your townhome type. But we do have an airport there. We have a large mall that just came online. It's because of I-75 And I believe that the interstate highways are an avenue to, just as railroads, can increase the productivity of manufacturing and our industrial areas. We, housing is.
And I agree with you, Peter, and
so.
To that end, but there's only so many interchanges on I-75, and maybe it is super highway transportation that spurs that kind of growth, but then we need to be planning other roads. I-75 unfortunately can't handle all traffic in the world, and we can't continue to widen it forever. We know that doesn't work either, but maybe we need some other parallel, I know east-west routes in the county have always been an issue. It's been an issue for decades and decades and decades.
And I think over time, Florida's become more than God's waiting room, as you say.
Yeah, well, I know too. I'm glad it is, because I'm still here, aren't I?
Right.
So, I haven't taken up my friend's advice yet from up north, but.
So how many more of these do we have to get through? Because we're stuck on number 2.
All right. There's just one more after this.
So one more? Okay.
Yes.
Lucky 3, David.
Because he's running out of beef sticks up
Yeah,
here.
the chairman's on beef stick number 5 now, so.
So we commented a lot tonight about the strategies and different elements of the strategies and about the public input that we heard. But we'd really just honestly love to hear your perspectives as, the local planning board, what should be done, what is your vision for the future of the community? Because we want that, we want to know. I mean, we're going to come back to you, and we want to know if what we provide to you is consistent with that.
I think you heard a lot about it just in
Yeah.
the last half an
You
hour.
certainly have.
An hour, or however long. this
Well, I
was.
think the discussion we just had on employment and supporting infrastructure for employment, I think is important in number 3 too. I mean, because I think we should be more than a bedroom community and in God's waiting room. So, so you need to have a balance of employment to housing. And so having that vision for where our employment's going to be located, what the supporting transportation infrastructure will be for, I think is important, because it sort of sets the bones of, this is where we want employment, stay away from it. Housing, this is off limit to housing. And then you can kind of grow out from there. That kind of becomes your employment centers, and then you can orient your housing around, to John's point.
And yes, and so what I find in a weakness in our current comprehensive plan is just because one draws a future land use map does not make it so. If you take the map we've got, somebody said this should be EC Employment Center, but there was no thought about how I'm getting the raw materials in and the finished goods out. Or where's the transportation network to get my commuters into these offices or whatever that employment center may be. Just because you drew a big yellow area on a map doesn't make it happen that way. And so that's where the strategies need to happen. Okay, we want employment centers. How are we going to set the table to make those successful employment centers?
Yeah, growth happens organically, but you have to have an environment
beyond
right for
just that,
organic
because
growth.
if you don't know where you want your employment to be,
Right.
you also don't know where your priority should be for road improvements and airport improvements.
You're
and
correct.
rail
They have
improvements.
to go hand in hand and that's all I'm saying, is just because that's where I think our comprehensive plan is lacking. We've drawn on a map, employment center, but without providing a plan for a roadway network to get in and out of said employment center, the various commercial areas that are needed to support the employment, the people who work in employment centers, and then the housing around them. In some ways, if you look at our land use map, I mean, it is a crazy gerrymandered map that was, and I'm not faulting anybody who did this in the past. I know there are a lot of political considerations when you're drawing such a map, but that's how you have to strategize, is if I want industrial development or I want high-level office employment, what am I going to do to support those things, and what are all of the things I need to support those things, and those have to be a part of the plan too. And hopefully that's what you'll do. Absolutely.
And I think that needs to morph into the MPO long-range transportation plan, because it should set the priorities for
Absolutely.
where we fund roads, where we fund rail, airports, et cetera.
Yes, sir.
We currently do our transportation planning just based on general traffic analysis of what roads are going to fail in the future. We don't necessarily do it based on where it should
So
support
that's
employment.
not planning, that's a reaction.
It's a reaction, it's not proactive.
I'm going to make one more pitch for the airport out in Zephyr Hills. If you stop and think about it, Zephyr Hills is very close to what other county? Polk County, right?
Yes.
301, or I believe that's the road, it goes north-south. You know,
And 98.
98, you got I-4 over there too. So I think at some point in time, you're going to see Zephyr Hills, and the population for Pasco County is growing that way too. I drove from last time we were in Dade City. I just made a mistake by taking Chansey Road to go south, and I meandered through that whole area out there. You know, you all know how many homes are going out there. The population is moving that way. It's going from the east side of the county to the west side of the county. And I know it's 5 o'clock, and I usually quit at 5 o'clock, but that's my last pitch for now on Zephyr Hills Airport.
Thank you.
Well, I think you're right. An airport is very important to
I
any
think it's a
community.
resource we have, yeah.
Commuter airport, and I think if you look around and you see the most successful communities have commuter airports.
Well, and I think getting a roadway network that supports that airport, 98, getting it
Right.
widened, getting 56 extended into Zephyr Hills so that it can help support the airport. I mean, the airport's sort of just sitting there in a vacuum. It needs some supporting roadway infrastructure as well to make it a meaningful economic engine.
I think there has to be, in my mind, if you want this to be successful, and I don't believe this happened or didn't happen enough in the past, is you have to make an assessment of what resources does the county have, and then how are we going to make the most of those resources? And I apologize to anybody from the city of Newport Richey that could be listening now, but I find that Newport Richey has the most underutilized waterfront I have ever seen and I grew up here. I love the quaint little homes along the river, and I love to drive Grand Boulevard, but we have pediatric offices along the Pythla-Chiscoty River, even where your office is, Mr. Gray.
That's right.
That could be Hooters South. But, okay?
I like that idea.
Have you ever been
But you know what?
Obviously, you haven't been there lately.
And so here's what I'm saying. So why can't I have Hooters South where Mr. Gray's office is? That's because I have an infrastructure problem. There are 2 bridges along the Pythla-Chiscoty River that are in the way of any substantive boat traffic getting to those areas, because those bridges are not high enough. So what I'm getting at is we need to, this is where we make an assessment of the resources, how could we better use the resources, and then what infrastructure is actually needed to support those resources. In those cases, if that became and I'm not suggesting Newport Richey should do anything, but if that's the case, then they would need to make a decision that, hey, we need to make these bridges higher, or we need to make them drawbridges, or whatever the case may be. But I think that's how you start.
The reason the one at Gulf, I think.
And then we have to accept the resources that we have, and we have to work with the resources that we have, not the ones we wish we had.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, that's something I've said for a long time, is that, you should focus on your assets as a county, and most people are drawn to, it's the ecotourism that encourages growth. So, that's why you have everybody that live along the water. You look at the United States and everybody's clustered to the coast. That's where that growth starts from, and like you said, the harbors and so forth. So we should try to leverage what we can, the natural resources, the natural features that we have as a county, and use those as catalysts for growth outside of that. And I think that's well underutilized on the west side of this county.
And we have to have political strategies to achieve. For instance, I think there's a vision for Harbor Town in the Arapika area, but the key to making Harbor Town work is getting the boat channel through Philman's Bayou, Philman's Creek there. Okay, then the county has to put its resources to get that done. We know from Ridge Road what a slog that can be, right? But if that's something we truly want, then we've got to dedicate the resources to doing
That could catalyze the entire northwest Pasco area. So I think that's one of your keys to improving property values, growth, everything. So.
Well, did that give you enough to think about?
It certainly did.
You've got your homework.
We certainly do. And I'm going to let Hyatt have the final word here, but I just want to say my dad would be really, really proud that the fact that Hooters came up at this particular meeting. Big deal for him. I just want to let you know.
Hey, it's a local company, all right?
That's right.
Clearwater.
That's right. Thank you.
Apparently, if there is a Hooters South, it'll apparently be on the consent agenda.
Yes.
We all love
Just
chicken.
gave me an idea, I know that.
Yeah, my dad wouldn't, because he's very conservative and he's a vegan, so.
We have beef O'Brady's on the river with not one.
They have fried
access
pickles.
to the actual
Oh.
river.
Yeah, and that was a whole permitting issue, yeah. That drove me crazy too.
Well, thank you so much for all this feedback and all this input. And yes, we do have our homework, and we will be going through all of your suggestions, and we'll watch this planning commission meeting 2-3 times, I guess, to ensure that we had covered everything that you guys had talked about. So thank you so much for your attention, and we'll be coming back to you guys. Thank
both
you.
very much.
Forward to it.
Did a
Thank
great
you.
job.
Did we do
Thank
better
you.
than the other people you came to talk to? Did we get
Depends on
that
our definition of better. All right, Mr. Chair, motion to adjourn.
Yes, I'd like to make, on the basis of a 3-sausage meeting, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Yeah.
Already been made. Second.
Oh. Wait, like less than a minute, I promise.
Oh.
So, planning officials training, Tuesday,
All right,
September
that's
26th.
Tuesday, yeah.
The location has changed to the boardroom.
Oh, it's here?
um,
Okay.
At 8:30. Okay,
Here?
the training will start at 9 a.m. So between 8:30 and 9, there's gonna be like registration. So,
Where do you want this body to sit for that?
Probably in
meeting?
the audience.
In the audience?
I am not sure how, Jeff may have some information as to how it's gonna be set up. It might be done as a, workshop type of a thing, but we'll email you. I just wanna let you know that the location's changed. It's here, not in the, internal services building.
Well, I'm only asking because I think the Board of County Commissioners is invited too, right?
The Board of County Commissioners is
I just don't want
invited,
them sitting in their seats or whatever, if that's,
You mean you want them
Well-
sitting in our seats?
That's exactly right.
Yes, my name's right here.
Yeah, so we'll get you some information on logistics upcoming, but I didn't want you to go to the internal services building.
Thank you.
It's here.
Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Denise.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Now, do I hear a motion
Motion.
to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, and a second?
Second.
Yeah, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're officially over. For
County waterways and wildlife depend on you to keep them healthy. Excess fertilizer, grass clippings, trash, oils, and pet waste wash into gutters and storm drains when it rains. Stormwater carries these pollutants directly into our lakes and rivers, creating an unhealthy environment for fish, waterfowl, and other aquatic animals. Storm drains are meant for clean rainwater. Most other discharges are illegal. If you suspect an illicit discharge, please contact Pasco County Department of Public Works at 727-834-3611.
They serve, as I did, to fight for our freedoms. We here at Go Pasco want to return the favor by serving you. Go Pasco offers all active duty military and veterans unlimited free rides on our fixed route buses. When you step on the bus, just show the driver one of these forms: military ID card, DD Form 2, valid VA card, V on your driver's license, or Go Pasco Veteran ID. Go Pasco, where veterans ride free.
Roughly 90,000 dogs in Pasco County create more than 5 tons of waste every year. When left on the ground, stormwater carries bacteria and nutrients from pet waste into waterways, causing algae blooms and unhealthy conditions for fish and other aquatic creatures. Polluted waters are also unsafe for swimming and recreation. Please do your part to keep Florida waters clean by disposing of your pet's waste in the trash. For more information, contact Pasco County Department of Public Works at 727-834-3611.
One of the primary questions that we are often asked is, should I keep my horse indoors or outdoors during a hurricane? So if we have an impending storm coming, where is the best place to house these horses during that event? It depends a little bit on what type of housing you have available for your horses, but most of our horses do very well actually staying outdoors in a large paddock or pasture during a storm, as long as you're securing some potential projectiles. If you've got some equipment or things around the pasture or outdoors that might be a danger to the horses, just making sure that you're tying down or securing those items, or removing those items and placing them somewhere safe where they can't become projectiles. Horses are really good at evading some of the worst weather. A lot of the times if they're housed as small groups or larger herds in a pasture, they'll actually gather together and kind of just turn their hindquarters to the wind and the rain. Housing horses indoors is an option, but usually we only recommend that if you know with your construction or your design of the barn if it's actually going to withstand hurricane force winds. What we get into trouble with is if horses end up getting trapped in a barn or housing structure that becomes damaged during a hurricane. Again, that debris can cause injury or death, or it makes it harder to reach those horses and get them out after the storm has passed. So outdoor housing is perfectly fine. Depends a little bit on your situation and the type of pasture or paddock or type of barn that you have at your facility. A lot of horses end up with eye injuries, and eye injuries are very serious in horses, and they cost a lot of money to treat and to care for. So we certainly want to try to avoid that. So sometimes owners can actually place a fly mask on the horse's face during that hurricane if those horses are going to be left outdoors. That just helps